Hello and welcome to the KARDS 2024 World Championship pre-show. I'm joined here with Starry, and we're going to take a look at the bracket. We're going to take a look through some decks, I believe, and we will be shortly underway with the games that I'm sure you are also excited for.
All right, so after two brutal rounds of competition yesterday, we have Spoker versus Dandelion and Aussie versus Gork. We saw Tree Pipit being knocked out by Spoker, Introduction being knocked out by Winner Will Win, Stanislav losing to Dandelion, Guess losing to Zyloser, Zyloser being knocked out to Dandy, and as you can see the rest of these results here. But lots of really, really good players not quite able to make it, but we have decided our final four, and we're super, super excited to see how this goes today.
Yeah, absolutely. And shall we take a look through the player cards for each of these top four that have made it through the gauntlet? First up, we have Spoker here with favorite card Exploit the Gap, a very spicy pick, with 8,426 total games this year, most played faction Germany. Uh, Very cool. And we've got his nice profile picture with 1939 up there. Would you like to take us through Spoker's deck, Starry?
Sure, thank you. So Spoker's first deck is a British-US deck that is definitely relying mostly on ramp, using the Bomber Mafias and production orders as sort of those main ways to get big bombers, get damage through. Playing Lancaster and Wellington as well. So that's kind of the package that it's looking to beat down the opponent with, but until then, just kind of control the board. Then we have the reverse with the US Britain, and this one is a little bit different. Playing cards like P51B, which is great both to draw or, forcing your opponent to get rid of it. But in both of these lists, we see a Calliope, which is a new card that's super, super good against some of these early game decks that we've been seeing. So we'll see if these Calliopes are enough to quell the early aggression. Then we have a Soviet Germany sort of Heinz mid-range tank focus deck, playing two copies of Feldenherhal rifles. But yeah, this card is a card that some players on this list have been playing and some players haven't been. It looks like Spoker has chosen to go with two copies of that card. It slows down the deck a little bit in the mid game, but then kind of speeds it up more in the late game. So definitely a trade-off there. And the glide bombing, very interesting. Instead of the dive bombing, it allows it to replace itself as long as you take out the unit. And then lastly, we have a Germany-Japan Chagro list. And it's a little bit heavier than some lists that we've seen. Playing a Panzer Grenadier, playing two copies of Zerstör, which is a card that has been seeing a lot of play lately, but not necessarily in this deck. And then playing Out of the Mist as well as two copies of Suppression. There's a lot of really good cards we're suppressing, but unfortunately the suppressions do kind of slow down Jagro a little bit. But anyways, yeah, those are Spoker's 4 decks.
Yeah, I find the glide bombing particularly interesting, but I'm sure we'll get to talk about that in the matches when they come up. Next up, we have Dandelion with 6,600 games. Favorite card, Great Patriotic War. And most played faction, again, we have Germany, a very solid 65% win rate. And let's take a look at what decks Dandelion is bringing today. So first up, we have a U.S. Soviet sort of frontline kind of strategy, making use of those tanks making use of the new 12th guards mechanized, a really standout card of the expansion, really bringing Soviet back into the forefront. Offering a 2 draw for just a 1 drop is obviously an incredibly powerful effect. And then next up, we have a really interesting Soviet German deck using lots of unique pieces, using the BM, using the Coruscant, the KV, a lot of these really powerful elite units. That new 9 drop that reduces in cost for each of your opponent's draws. That card has really made a big impact already in this tournament. And next up, we have a Britain France, which I believe we saw get banned yesterday. We're very likely to see some play today, with these compromises, using them to have a mill strategy. And then finally, we have a German Soviet deck that aims to use these 12th guards mechanized again, but this time with Germany main for those tanks that are so powerful, and Blitzkrieg as a huge finisher. Um, so, you know, a little bit of this 12th guards mechanized across the lineup, but really a curveball in that mill list.
Yeah, I mean, I think these 12 mechanized are probably the defining card of the expansion. We've seen Soviet skyrocket in popularity, being probably one of the weakest, if not the weakest, nation before, to being probably the best, or dang close to it. It's just such an efficient draw package, and you're rewarded for doing things that you already want to do. So yeah, it's no surprise to see 3 copies there. All right, next up we have Aussie with 7,200-ish total matches and a 63% win rate. Most played Germany. Germany has been a really solid mid-range list for the last 9 months, and a lot of the top Chinese players really like playing it with like War Machine. And so yeah, it's no surprise to see a lot of these players coming in with Germany as the most played faction, but Stars and Strife's favorite card, very interesting. Let's take a look at what Aussie is bringing today. We got a Soviet Italy control list, relying on that front formation, that great new card that makes a T-34 for 1 turn at the beginning of every turn at the cost of 1 HQ defense. As sort of the finisher in an otherwise really solid control list. Also able to squeeze through damage with the Machi, as well as trading really nicely into any like B-24s that are made off strategic bombing. And then we have a Germany-US mid-range list that is playing just a bunch of really, really solid cards. But what's interesting is that there is no War Machine in this one. Just going with the Greyhound and the 164ths, basically just like a reverse front line. So a little bit different than some of the other mid-range lists that we've seen. Then we have Brit Japan Air playing 1 copy of Defeat in Detail, which is really nasty if you're going first and you can get it down early. I mean, even second, going second is fine too, as long as you can get it down early. But yeah, just allowing your bombers and your fighters to consistently get bigger over time is really nice. And we do see 4 duty bound as well, so interesting to see Brit Air get some new buff tools from Japan. And then lastly, I mean, this is the most interesting list for sure, is the Japan-Italy list. People have been trying to make this work for time immemorial, essentially. And Aussie has had startling success with this Japan-Italy control list. Super excited to see this here. I'm sure that we'll see a lot of people taking this list into ladder. because how could you not be excited? This is such a cool list. I absolutely love it. So, anyways, yep, that's what Aussie is bringing for us today.
And finally, we have Gork with the lowest number of total matches out of this top four, with 2,555. Favorite card, Sincerely Yours. Really a classic Brit staple at this point. And most played nation, Germany. Now, if we take a look at Gork's lists, we will see first up, right at the front, we have this really crazy Japan Soviet OTK deck, I would call it, that really looks to use these self credit denial synergies with One Roof as fast as possible, and just running all the draw possible with sallies, with expansions, with air lane and sea, to get through your deck extremely quickly, play all your diplomatic attaches, your duty bounds, and kill your opponent really quickly. Uh, we will see if it's able to get there. The deck really lacks defensive tools to stall out the game, so it really needs to rely just on the speed of getting to that point where you're able to kill your opponent. Next up, we have a US Britain ramp deck, um, using 4 copies of the Glamour Boys, using Bomber Mafias, these really classic cards, but adding in a few new things with 4 copies of the Calliope or Calliope. I know there's a little bit of division on how to pronounce the card. Um, and then we have the counterpart to this deck, which is a Brit US ramp deck. Again, running a few copies of the Calliope, running Bomber Mafia naturally, um, and really looking to, control the board and get to this big stuff. One thing that I do find an interesting decision is that he has a Halifax in the US main version, but he doesn't have a Halifax in the Brit main version, um, which is a little unorthodox because usually the Brit main version is a little more likely to run it because of how well it synergizes with Wellington. So we will have to see how these lists perform, how that works out for him. And finally, we have a German US list, very reminiscent of last couple of months, except, of course, without Reichsbank. Instead, again, running 4 copies of this Calliope. Gork is clearly very, very high on this card in his appraisal of it. Um, and this deck is looking to sort of be a bit of a tank deck, use Aunt Frida with some of these infantry, some of these tanks, some of these airplanes. And this is very exciting to see. Aunt Frida is a new card that hasn't really uh, proved
one.
Saving the day.
Can't believe it! Look at this!
Hi, welcome back. We are going to quickly take you through the bans between Spoker and Dandelion, but first we're going to take a real quick look at the decks again, just to do a quick overview. So here is Spoker. He is running this Britain US ramp list. And we also have a US Britain ramp list, and then a Soviet German sort of mid range blitzkrieg aggro list, and then finally Japan, Germany, Aunt Frida Jagro. And Starry will be taking us through the next set of lists from Dandelion.
Yep, Dandelion is coming at us with a US Soviet mid-range list, relying on some tanks and those 12 cards mechanized. We got a Soviet Germany mid-range list, very similar to Spoker's. A Britain France mill list. That one is going to be something. And then we have a Germany Soviet mid-range list, so doing the little nation switch for us. But yeah, definitely going to be some tough competition as we start off with our semifinals here. Spoker having the Jagro list banned and Dandelion having that mill list banned. Berto, anything to say about this?
Yeah, I have experimented with mill lists recently, and I am surprised that Spoker is so afraid of it. It feels like, the deck has been hit pretty hard. He has a lot of decks that should play pretty favorably into mill, I would think. Although, of course, I'm not the one who's done the deck testing. Maybe it turns out that some of his lists are quite weak to it because of how much draw they run. But things like Jagro, things like these sort of mid-range decks can be quite powerful. But he is also bringing two ramp lists, so I suppose if he was sure that neither of his ramps were getting banned, then, it starts to make some sense.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with J King yesterday, and was talking about how ramp is not a really great matchup into mill, just because you have so few threats, and if you just draw like 10 ramp cards and then one B24 or something like that, that's what Mill is going to prey off of. Mill struggles when it's playing against decks where every card is gas, but that's not really the case with Ramp, right? Ramp has a couple of key payoffs, and if they can get you to either mill those, or they can take them out with a couple pieces of like removal that they are actually playing, stuff like Defend in Depths, then yeah, I mean, you're kind of just left sitting with a handful of ramp orders. So I don't know if you would agree with that, but that's kind of the impression that I was getting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One other thing is that it's quite brave to bring this mill deck when front formation is now a card, and Soviet has some sort of infinite value again at the cost of some health, but of course, mill is also healing your opponent. Um, and now we will be getting into the games. We have Spoker's Britain main ramp versus Dandelion's German aggro tank deck.
Yeah, and Spoker does have the turn 2 War Machine. Turn 3 First Responders is an option. Uh, Interesting to see the Glamour Voice get thrown back. I guess Spoker's saying, well, I'm on the draw. It's a little bit slow. Um, But yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
there's just not that many low-cost cards to begin with that Svoker could be looking for, really.
yeah. I think what may be key here is less the speed of Spoker's hand and more the speed of Dandelion's, which
Absolutely. I
has
mean,
a very awkward start.
that is really not what you want to see starting off the semi-final match of the World Championship. You really, really need to see those early units. Ideally, go into some 35Ts or some 3-drop SUs, the 5-4 that deals 2 damage to HQ. But the Feldherr rifles is a little bit better, maybe with the credits that it's accelerating you. Maybe you can start to catch up. Spoker setting up that first responders.
Yeah, it's not the best card for Dandelion to draw here, but I think you're pretty happy to just be drawing a 3-drop on 3 there, or else you're dealing 1 damage to the HQ probably and passing, which would just be the nightmare scenario. But a
Mm-hmm.
little bit bailed out by, you know, perhaps a middle of the road draw, but still something that works in the situation.
Mm-hmm. And we see that Monty, a looming threat, as Dandelion placed all of their cards on the same side. Is there any reasons that you do want to do that in this deck? I know that Bridair, of course, you want to set up your close air supports, but is there a reason that Dandelion in particular would be playing them all on the right side like that?
Um, I'm trying to think, but I would imagine it's just out of habit, which, is a very strong force in these games. Especially if you've played tank decks before that are running things like perhaps the oh, I'm losing the name of it right at the
SCK
worst
or support
moment.
column?
Support column, that's what I was thinking of. Thank you, Starry.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean I think that this Monty is looming very, very large for Dandelion here, especially having that 4-drop tank on board.
Yeah, for sure. Although it's hard to pinpoint the turn that Dandelion is going to want to operate all these units. Because if you're just preventing, maybe one thing moving forward for the 22nd, that's not the maximum amount of value that you're able to get out of this Monty. Especially against a Blitzkrieg deck, you're able to look for so much more from that card.
Yeah, I mean the 35T is pretty nice. It gets a little bit awkward, but you could go like 35T into SU into pushing up and attacking with your other SU out the credits that Feldherr rifles gives you. Dive bombing also seems like you could get some work done. Dandelion is not at a loss for options, just none of them are 100% ideal right now.
Yeah, you can even dive bombing Blitzkrieg, and that would fully trade out this 5th Brigade, but, obviously you want to try to get Blitzkrieg on more than one unit. Now, this is a much better line than what I was just proposing. Using the dive bombing and the sickle and the 35T, get to keep onto that Blitzkrieg, still deal with the threat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really impressed with Dandelion's ability to get back into this game. Really, really, really efficient credit usage, making sure that every play that they do is impactful and I mean, will it be enough? We'll see. That
Bomber
Bomber
Mafia.
Mafia is a big deal. The Monty is a big deal. Um, I mean, the Pack 40s could push some damage here. You could go for the SU and give your guys some buffs. Um, Heck, you could actually do both. I would love to see the Feldherr rifles get pushed up. Yep. Setting up a
And this,
big blitzkrieg. But I
yeah,
believe that
but
Spoker has Ultra, right?
Spoker does have Ultra, and perhaps even more importantly, he does have Bomber Mafia here. And we will see that nerf to 738 Jaeger Regiment really make a big impact here because uh, just a little bit prior, that would still be a 1-1 in the front line, making Blitzkrieg all the more powerful.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes Jaeger trades uh, with some units. Sometimes the stats don't matter, right? But sometimes the stats do.
Yeah.
It's definitely not an unmeaningful nerf. It definitely has many application cases.
This is a critical Monty from Spoker. He's recognizing the vulnerability to Blitzkrieg. Um, Dandelion would have been able to get 4 units into the front line with that SU in the back and the 35T from hand. Enigma here, not exactly what you're looking to see.
No,
With such a
but
crazy hand.
when you do have the ability to have some small amounts of credit acceleration, it allows you to be um a little bit more aggressive in what you're throwing down. You don't have to care quite so much about recouping card advantage, so
Yeah, and speaking of card advantage, those 12th mechanized are just so crazy good in these middle of the game turns where you're able to play a few of them right before something like an SU, and you're doing even better than 1 credit draw 2 because you're also getting the bodies.
yeah. I mean, that card is absolutely nutty. Um, there's a reason that we've seen it in roughly 60% of decks by my estimate uh, during this top four. So, oh, wave
Ooh,
after
and
wave.
that is a crazy draw out of Spoker.
That's absolutely brutal. I, on one hand, would like to see this Panzergrenz come out. It really nicely cleans up both things with the amount of credits you have. The problem is that you have too many cards in hand. So if Dandelion had one less card, the Panzergrenz would really clean up everything quite nicely. But
Yeah, that's really awkward. Nakshub here helps a little bit. Give this 35T the reduced credit cost and buy back a couple of credits.
I guess you go for the mechanized. It has Blitz and a 2/2 body as opposed to the other stuff. When you're
Yeah,
choosing between three draw engines, I suppose choose the one with the best body and the best draw, and I think it's mechanized.
I would agree. 22nd is extraordinarily unlikely to find more than one draw in this game, especially with Spoker just going to the HQ and putting on pressure and saying, I bet you can't deal with this. Certainly not if he's able to create another 6 attack bomber. We don't have the hands right at this moment, but this play might suggest that there's more burst damage in hand. Panzer Greed late is quite good, but it's just a little awkward with the Blitzkrieg.
Yeah, this is the play that that um that I was thinking about, but
But
I'm
he
not
had
sure if
to
you're.
leave the Calliope double trade with the bomber.
Yeah,
Maybe a bit
that
of a miscalculation from Dandelion there.
yeah, that heavy armor on the bomber, I mean, is just so important. What a what a ridiculously powerful card. Those bombers hard carry these US Britain and Britain US ramp lists that we've been seeing around quite a lot, both at a tournament level and on ladder too. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like I go against that deck. One of those two decks, probably like 40% of the time or more.
Yeah, I've certainly seen a lot of B24s, and especially with my favorite deck to come out of the expansion being the 3 operation cost deck,
Mm-hmm.
or as some colloquially call it, Throp. Um, I have been abusing that card a little bit myself, I must admit. And here we are, right into the next game.
Yeah, and it looks like Dandelion again has sort of a slow start, but definitely has the ability to draw some cards pretty quickly in these upcoming turns. But that Calliope is tough to deal with.
Yeah, and how frustrating is it to see the production order immediately after you just lost to that card? Potentially to a mistake with how you dealt with the card, even as well. Also, you asked about putting all your units on the same side before and if there's any advantage. It could have been about the Calliope, right?
Mm,
Depending on how you want to position for that randomly attributed damage.
true, true.
The
Yeah,
Calliope, sorry,
Calliope
go
gets
ahead.
way better on targets in the front line just because you never have to deal with the HQ. You're always guaranteed to like hit targets that are in the front line. Um, but yeah, I mean it's oftentimes still worth taking the gamble on cards that aren't in the front line. So
Yeah, the Calliope, just because it's a new card, in case anyone doesn't know, it deals 2 damage randomly to the unit you target and its adjacent targets. So it can really make positioning matter, similarly to cards like Bombing Raid in the past. So there's a lot to think about with those small decisions that can make a big difference later on in the game. Now, Dandelion is certainly locked into trading here, but then there's a few decisions. If you go for the Felderhausen or if you go for the SU, um, one promises credit return, another promises more access to the backline to maybe be able to kill something like a bomber, perhaps. And without that SU down, suddenly the second Calliope, there's not much of a way to deal with it.
yeah, I
And
mean Spoker is bringing 11 copies of Calliope across their 3 decks. So yeah, definitely very popular card in today's top 4. Um, Kind of gives me flashbacks to Swag a little bit, even though the cards are vastly different. But just seeing a lot of copies across a lot of different types of lists, being a 3-cost artillery.
yeah, and Spoker is 5 credits up right now. Uh, 6 credits up when it's on his turn. And when ramp plays that many cards to ramp themselves, you really want to be seeing a really strong tempo advantage the other way. And Dandelion has a bit of that, but it really feels like he just doesn't have enough at this stage in the game through no fault of his own to keep up.
Yeah, Dandelion's playing one copy of Suppression in one of his lists. I need to remind myself of which of those lists it is. Yeah, Dandelion is not playing any suppressions in this particular list. So the options are like Pack 40s, Admiral Hippers, Dive Bombings, to get rid of that 610.
Yes, and thankfully there is a pack 40 in hand for Dandelion, which keeps him from really just completely being out of this game here.
Yeah, it's still not a great position to be in, but you still have options, and given that Spoker just has those V24s, if you can figure out ways to take the board here and then present enough threats that the bombers aren't gonna get to stick around for very long, then you absolutely have pathways to victory. But it definitely is an uphill battle.
Yeah, I don't really like the push up from this Hellcat, as it is vulnerable to things like 35T, and particularly the 12th mechanized. I feel like, with tanks, sometimes the advantage is that you get to leave them in the back line, where they're a little safer. Assuming your opponent doesn't have something like a strat bombing a Stars and Stripes.
Yeah, I don't really love this. You know that you have a way, a solid way, of taking out this 5th Brigade. And you also know 2 of the what will be 3 cards in your opponent's hand the following turn. I think that you have to say, I can't just throw my SU into the 5th Brigade. That's so free for them. I really would have liked to see the Pack 40 come out before anything gets pushed to the front line. Now, you could also just like keep your stuff in the back line so that it doesn't trade out. But yeah, not super thrilled about this.
Yeah, and that is game with the other bomber in hand for Spoker. And you see him breathe a sigh of relief, celebrate a little bit, but it's not over yet. He needs to get one more win in here. And it won't be off the back of a turn 2 war machine this time around.
And
Now,
Spoker just needs to find a pathway to victory with Soviet Germany mid-range, which is definitely not a matchup specific deck. It's a deck that should have pretty solid matchups against really whatever Dandelion throws. So, I mean, it's going to be very difficult for Dandelion to win this series.
yeah, and we go right to the mirror match. And I'm not familiar with this matchup. I have not played this deck before, but I imagine going second here for Dandelion is quite scary.
Yeah, I was testing last night both Spoker's and Dandelion's lists, and this little 1/2 infantry that Dandelion is playing at first glance looks pretty bad. It's decent in decks like tokens, but it doesn't really synergize with your deck that much aside from enabling the 35T. And so you think, man, is that card really worth playing? And then you play with it a little bit, and you're like, oh wait, this card is actually like significantly more solid than I thought it would be. It just trades in really nicely over several turns. That token that it creates can be used to like make sure that you get to keep the front line, for example. I mean, there's so many really, really nice uses for the token. And of course, yeah, I mean, its primary function is to enable these 35 Ts, as we're seeing. But yeah, it's a lot more solid of a card than I think I gave it credit for than maybe some other people gave it credit for. So
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I also imagine that your other main one drop infantry, these 12th mechanized, I would imagine that's an extremely high priority target. And I can imagine how, those eat removal really fast, and then you might, have one or two, but then they get removed, and you still need an infantry for these 35 Ts. You still need some anti-aggression early. It makes a lot of sense, and it's quite clever to run that in this deck, I think. A couple main options from Dandelion here. He goes for the SU and the draw, rather than playing that BM, getting rid of the Felderhauser right away.
yeah, I would have liked to get rid of the Felder Hall, just because of the acceleration that it's gonna give Spoker. Um, it's definitely a really difficult decision either way, and we obviously have the privilege of seeing both players' hands. But yeah, I mean, I think that the advantage gained through those credits, especially when Spoker's already going first, being 7 credits to 4 credits is just a massive difference, especially in a mirror match where you're looking to more or less drop the same cards. I mean, credit advantage is huge.
Yeah, suppose maybe the thought from Dandelion here is that, you know, it's really awkward to get the BM sent to hand, which is guaranteed if you kill the Felder Howler. Um, and but on the flip side, you don't know for a fact that your opponent is going to have an SU, an efficient unit to trigger the effect, right? Because Spoker was fairly low on cards. And now the BM comes out. That
The
is a
BM
little
is a
surprising to me.
the BM is a fantastic card in this matchup, but just in general. I need to double check, but I don't remember Spoker playing it. I do want to very quickly double check though. Yeah, Spoker is not playing the BM, and I mean I really like it. I really like it personally. I think that it puts in a lot of work here. Starts just taking out guys one at a time. It basically never dies unless your opponent uses suppression on it or like double bloody sickle. So yeah, I mean Dandelion is looking a lot nicer than a couple of turns ago.
Yeah, it does seem well positioned in this matchup, especially with Spoker's glide bombing over the dive bombing.
Mm-hmm.
That card just does nothing against the BM at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Yeah, we're gonna see the KV1 come out. But I think that Dandelion should be able to clear it if they want. I mean, the question is whether it's worth doing it right now or whether it's worth kind of just pushing some stuff up to the front line, trying to ping some stuff with the artillery, maybe playing the Felderhalle. Um, but yeah, Dandelion definitely looks like they have plenty of options. And although the KV is annoying, you have the life to play with. Life is a resource. The only one that matters is the last one. So yeah,
I
going
see
straight
Dandy.
for HQ.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of a gambit. it guarantees that this game will not last too many more turns.
Yeah, when
I
you
like the
have
play.
the Blitzkrieg, the SU, and most importantly the BM, which even with the glide bombing is a 4-turn clock. Yeah, I mean Spoker's going to be spending all the resources just to trade out, and when you have a guaranteed clock, and Spoker's options are either develop threats or get the position down to basically an empty board. And you still get to keep your clock. I think it's a really nice position for Dandelion to be in.
Yeah, I don't think I like this glide bombing from Spoker because your opponent's gone for such an aggressive line here. How much does it matter keeping this Felderhaller alive versus just a little more tempo versus getting that KV into the front line, right?
This is a very aggressive play, deciding more or less. I mean, I don't know about you. It looks like Dandelion is more or less locked into using that second bloody sickle here. Otherwise, there's not really a whole lot of point in going for that.
Well, yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
I mean, Corson is a great draw off of that sickle. You didn't use it for any reason than to draw one and take 3 damage, but Corson is a pretty crazy card.
Yeah, and half of Spoker's hand roughly is turned off. I mean, the SUs are 100% turned off, and the Yak is putting yourself on a 2-turn clock. Spoker has to figure out a way to win in very, very quickly. Let's see what cards they have in their deck that will be capable of dealing with that BM. They have one copy of Suppression, but that would, you'd have to suppress and then attack it, which would be kind of difficult with that Corson. And you have one copy of Breakthrough. I'm not sure if they've used it this game. I remember that they drew a last game. But either way,
Breakthrough has
Spoker's,
not been played. No, not this game.
yeah, this is gonna be tough.
And another Felderhaller. I mean, it's his best option, but it just doesn't really do anything to increase this pressure.
Yeah, I mean, Spoker's playing towards realistically a breakthrough at this point. If you drew suppression last turn, I think you maybe had the ability to present a board and uh and get through, but when Dandelion's just gonna be able to trade out with the KV or the Felderhalle,
Oh, no, no, no. Surely you don't play Sickle here.
it doesn't change
No, it doesn't change
the
the trades unless
calculations at
you
all.
attack with the... Wait, oh, because it has heavy armor too, of course.
Oh, it has heavy armor too. Yeah, I completely forgot about that. And there we go. And that's gonna be it. That's gonna be all she wrote. So yeah, Dandelion winning the mirror.
No, that's a
Oh,
Blitzkrieg off the top, Starry.
oh, okay.
And Spoker
Apologies.
is ecstatic with that win we see on the camera, and Dandelion just in disbelief that it was over that quickly. And it didn't feel like there were too many different ways to get out of those situations. We had a few mistakes from him, but that was a brutal set of 3.
Yeah, yeah, the Blitzkrieg off the top to get through the guards. Yeah, wow, exactly what you needed. So yeah. Anyways, congratulations to Spoker. Definitely got to be thrilled to move on, and such a dominant performance. I mean, Spoker has gone, I believe, 3-2 in the game that we watched yesterday, whereas every time that we've seen Dandelion play, Dandelion has gotten like 3-0, 3-0, 3-0 pretty much, or 3-1. So, yeah, really surprised to see Spoker come in with such a dominant performance, especially when many of those decks were mirror matches or pretty dang close, right? I mean, similar tank-based mid-range strategies. Um, yeah, wow, what a set.
Yeah, and we saw in that last game in the mirror match, it was so close. And, just with one thing going differently on that last turn, the game goes the other way. And then 1-2, that's a very winnable position to be in for Dandelion. But the cards gods are very capricious, as everyone knows, and it just didn't work out that way today.
All right, and one last congratulations to Spoker for being our first finalist for the KARDS 2024 World Championship. But we are going to pass it over to Thanatron and Corn Guy, our fellow co-casters. But we will be back to talk to you guys later. All right.
All right, awesome guys. Thank you so much. One more semifinal today before we get into our third place bronze match, and then the moment everyone has been waiting for, the 2024 World Championship final. We already have Spoker there. He needs an opponent. So we are going to get him one. I am here with Corn Guy. We are happy to provide you this action. And what are you looking forward to in this matchup this morning?
I mean, the elephant in the room is, can we see Gork on the Japan Soviet deck pilot it? We need him to show us how this deck is played. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Absolutely, everybody wants to see a true master pilot some let's say complicated stuff, which would be a lot of fun for everybody. Let's go ahead and pull up our player cards and take a look at what each player is wielding today. So first we have Aussie. Aussie with a very impressive 7,000 matches, very impressive 63% win rate, right in line with where a lot of our pro players have been, in that right in the middle of that 60%. Stars and Stripes as a favorite card, which is a little interesting, as we have discussed about how Stars and Stripes maybe could have made a bigger impact in some of these games, but hasn't been taken a whole lot in this tournament. Let's see Ozzy's deck lists here today. All right, so the first thing we're starting out with is a big Soviet deck. So we see a kind of return to what some, make it easily call Soviet control. The Fiats and the Bloody Sickles providing a lot of early game punch, and then of course some huge board clears and defensive tools in the end, and then the new T-34 and that new guard rifles, both providing huge value for that Soviet top end now. Moving on, we have a German US that we have seen quite a bit. A lot of Calliope as well. That has been a big card this entire tournament, this entire new patch. It does not seem to be slowing down. And then interesting, we have a lot of Japan here in Aussie's second half. We have a Brit Japan, which is super interesting. Defeat in Detail being one of those new cards with some air superiorities to really punch sort of what you need. So a new version of Brit Air using a lot of those new Japanese buff tools. And then lastly, we have a Japan deck that is almost a little reminiscent of what Tree Pipit also brought in the top 24 here, or I'm sorry, top 16, going all the way to Empire of the Sun and To the Last Man, and this time taking Italy with another Decima and some big Makis, as well as those same fiats, not with Claim the Skies, but those fiats still really good early tools, able to get you some health. Really interesting lists by Aussie. And then, Corn, if you could take us through Gork.
I'd love to. I mean, we've seen his profile a lot. Sincerely Yours, great card, 67% win rate. Fewest matches here. Let's see if he can just get into the Worlds and get out with a championship. So let's go ahead and preview these decks real fast. As you can see here, we have the Japan Soviet OTK list. I think the interesting thing about this list, I know a lot of people have talked about it. What I'm most interested and excited in seeing this is what cards will York choose from air, land, and sea. Are you going to take more diplomatic attaches to keep damage stacking? Are you going to take more duty bounds to get more buffs stacking? Or are you going to take, a desperate measures to deal more damage to the board and deny yourself another credit in the process? To me, that's going to be the most interesting part of seeing this deck piloted. So moving on, we have the US Brit and the Brit US rampless respectively. Pretty standard stuff, running the new Blood and Iron Calliope packages in there as well. And I'll get back to them real fast. We have the German US mid range as well. So looking at this list as a whole, it is, I would say it's pretty good against Aussie's lineup. It has, two rampless, a mid range, and an OTK. So it's not going all in on an aggro strategy, and it's more mid range ramp type flavor. So in theory, it should have pretty favorable matchups versus Italy. So I'm interested to see what the ban phases are in this match.
And both players losing their Brit. Just banned Brit has always held true. It held true in 2020 cards. It's going to hold true in 2024 cards. Brit Air getting banned and a Brit Ramp getting banned. So very interesting here. We will see the players try to pull some wins out with their other three decks. Aussie, of course, having a Soviet deck, whereas Gork with the US deck. Really interesting to see Gork get the chance to play this full set on stream, as that the Gork deck has been very polarizing up to this point. We've heard a lot about it from casters, we've heard a lot about it from fans, and the opinion is either usually right, that it's great and you just don't know what you're doing if you can't pull the wins off, or it's bad and only Gork knows what he's doing because he's got the magic. So it will be super, super interesting to see how he's able to wield that today.
Yeah, and big thank you to Ozzy for not banning it. That would have been a true tragedy. A true tragedy if we made it this far and then had it ripped from us in the ban phase.
Yeah, absolutely. So can't wait for that. Our players are just getting ready here. We will take you to the action in just a moment. What do you think is sort of the crux of this matchup now that we kind of have all of the details? Do you think both players were correct to ban Brit?
Um, from Oz's perspective, banning Brit, as a strong ramp, which is good into your Italy lineup, the best. So I mean that makes sense to me. And from Gork's perspective, I'm not sure what his thoughts were in his lineup. He has a pretty flexible lineup, so perhaps that's just the one that counters his ramp the most, and that would make sense.
Gork starting on that US deck that Aussie does not have a parallel for. Like I said, the outliers here being Aussie's Soviet and Gork's US. We are starting with that US. So it should be pretty interesting. A lot of Calliopes on both sides. That card definitely having its effect here today, this weekend.
Great start from Aussie coming out. Nashub into 35T. York's going to have to eat a bit of damage while he ramps up.
Yeah, able to ramp to that glamour boy though, pretty quickly. So that is definitely going to be helpful. And the Calliope, showing its strength as something that isn't necessarily just for taking out other units. We see it provide some face damage as well, and of course, being a nice artillery body, you get a lot out of that play, even if you are just throwing that damage to face. Doesn't feel too bad.
No, both have the champion card back already. Aussie with a pretty nice
Good point.
fan trying to blow any weird happenings away.
All three Calliopes for Aussie in the first 15 cards of their deck is pretty wild. So truly able to see that card's effect. Aussie almost playing what looks like an artillery deck at this point. It's a full back line of just, I'm gonna shoot you and I'm gonna make money. It's pretty rough stuff. But Gork able to hold on to most of his health. He's ramped out a little bit. Not feeling too bad.
Imagine the US deck was bringing Stars and Stripes.
Yeah,
Could have done it.
absolutely.
Could have put it in. It's too late now, though. It's too late now.
Interesting here as well as Gork tries to set up what seems like a pretty obvious Bomber Mafia turn. It'll, of course, kill one Calliope and take the other two to half dead, which doesn't necessarily feel great. You wonder if maybe he can try to set it up with the Glamour Boy on the front line first, but with 2, 4, 6 damage from the 3 artillery, is able to take out the Glamour Boy. That doesn't work too well either. So I have to imagine, unless he draws something much better, likely see an early Bomber Mafia.
Yes. The Bomber Mafia. The bombers are already flying. They're already on their way.
Yeah, these wise guys bombers. And just a trade. Yeah, and the Bomber Mafia. We can't let you sit on 3 artilleries constantly. I was gonna say, I gotta imagine this is D Bomber. This works out really well. Able to get probably the best get that he could get from that developing a Blitz Bomber, and then of course also able to, with 5 credits left, hit a huge war bond. So really ramped out now for Gork.
We got DJ in hand. We got the D and the J primed and ready.
That's true. Both barrels of Big Bomber.
Both barrels. So while I guess the crux of the Calliope here is the 2 operation cost, right? Ozzy had a very powerful lead, and York's all, if you don't blink now, 5 credits up with only 3 health down, despite seemingly on the back ropes of that initial opening.
Another
My.
huge Bomber Mafia is going to kill the other 2. Calliope's going to kill Nakshub as well. Huge, considering we just saw a big German Sherman Panzergren play from Aussie. This is super helpful for Gorky's chances here.
Yeah, and buffing the 60-second out of trade from 35T is quite the play. Obviously it is the only really thing that made sense to do, but it's coming out pretty strong, and now, wow.
Yeah,
Where's the
Aussie.
3rd Bomber Mafia?
Oh my gosh, Glamour Boys, the Gorky top decks do not stop.
Yeah, I mean, there is only so much preparing you can do against some of the best players, because some of the best players just seem to have draws that are hard to replicate. And when they're on a heater like this, your practice partner can't necessarily top deck like you're going to, like it might come up against you. And all of a sudden you're like, oh man, Gork, I scrimmed against this deck and it went pretty well. And then all of a sudden you're just getting blown out by the most high roll consistently, and then you're just shaking your head.
A really, really timely Ant free to draw here will be a
Oh,
big help. And we are able to actually find 8 out of 11 damage for Aussie here after the suppression now with an unguarded HQ for Gork, getting dangerously close to lethal, but it doesn't look like it's there. So these trades are going to be absolutely crucial. This first game hangs on the balance of these decisions. And we got a huge errado, the biggest errado you've ever seen.
true. Imagine supply priorities unsuppressed the guard.
Now, obviously, Gork here could clear the 2 frontline units and still save the 5-1 Hellcat to completely clear the board. But Banshee is going to do a great job of that without. Of course, could also Wrath Lightning would be a really strong play as well, but you don't want to give that errado draw back to Aussie. No sense in doing that. So I really like this play with a full Hellcat here in the front line. Only 3 health, but he's going to be able to use that Glamour Boy hopefully as a big roadblock as well. But 3 health is 3 health, so concerning and not comfortable for Gork.
Yeah, that was an interesting line of trading out and then using the supply priorities mid trades to get the maximum heal. Now wondering if it comes back to bite in terms of only having a 3 defense unit in the front line. That is vulnerable to this breakthrough.
As he actually is looking at his restore, a 164th, and his single SKD that is in the deck, which is a very interesting choice, providing a little bit of blitz and a little bit of buff. The 164th, obviously, really no help to him here. Takes his restore. Oh, and a breakthrough. So we'll get a little bit of draw here. We'll get to move some stuff up.
Pretty good stuff. Let's see how Gert can respond, and if I would love another Glamour Boy to put myself guarded and up to 7. It's almost tempting to just convoy looking for it, but
That single copy of the 432nd Infantry Regiment as well for Aussie. There are some really interesting low-cost one-offs, right? 2 different one-drop one-offs, a single SKD, that single 432.
and
Both of
Aussie,
those coming up for Aussie, but not necessarily maybe in the ways that he wanted them.
yeah, Aussie is running Comet. That would be the card to find in this situation. And Glamour Boys was found, but it's a little too late. Oh no. Should have trusted the heart of the cards. But this is a good play too. This says you only win if you can find Comet.
He's got a draw for it. Let's see if the top decks
Oh,
continue. He's got another draw for it.
another chance.
Top deck draw, top deck Comet.
Oh boy. Something in my bowels is telling me Comet is coming.
Yeah, perhaps thinking about if he makes the Panzergun play, if it can help him survive. Will be an
Oh,
absolute shame if he draws Comet now off this.
yes. Not even trusting the process. Oh, it's not here.
And
All
it's
right.
just another 164th.
I guess don't trust corn guy's bowels.
There's one lesson you take away from today's festivities.
All right.
Already at 12 of 15 damage here. Only needs to find 3 for Gorky to take this first game, but has an awful lot of operation cost to pay to do that 12. So that last 3 damage certainly cannot come from one of these D-bombers. So yeah, really nice play with the Raft Lightning. Takes the buff off the Restorer, removes it for one big tempo turn. And I imagine the rest of this turn is just cashing in damage.
You might want to play the Glamour Boy as well.
Oh yeah, we did talk about him finding another one. I sort of already forgot. But yeah, that 7 health going to be super useful. Hipper is normally a pretty good pull here, but I don't know that it's going to do much for you. You could man, what do you even Hipper here? You don't want to give the Glamour Boy in the front line back. You don't want to give a Banshee back. You don't want to give a Sherman
Yeah.
back. You don't want to give a Calliope back.
Yeah, that would
Literally
be
everything on the board for Gorky with a deployment effect.
it would probably be one of your own units, either to get another draw or
Yeah,
another.
excellent point.
Yeah, but
Second Panzer Grand. And at this point, Gorky feeling pretty strong. Comet with a 2-turn kill. Could maybe even think about putting that Glamour Boy up, try to finish this game. But I don't think that's necessary. I think he can drop in 9 out of 15 damage and still hold a pretty nice shell. D-Bomber, of course, blocked by the Restorer, so tiny bit of complication.
ooh. Oh man, hitting 4/4 stats on board with that deployment effect.
And I like this play with moving a roadblock Raf up. Really, really safe conservative play. He's got the guard, and now he has the front line. So really no way for Aussie to wrest control back here. I have to imagine that this is it. It's going to be game 1 for Gork as we start our second semifinal match here. You can see both players taking all of their time, really thinking about it. This is for an opportunity at the World Championship into the finals. All resources must be exhausted quite seriously.
Yeah, and this isn't the worst for Aussie for knowing, looking at the lineups of the decks remaining, knowing that Gork can't play either ramp list now. It's only going to be the German mid range and the OTK. It makes evening this up at a 1-1 a little bit more manageable. And one thing, I guess I don't remember where all of the deployment effects from the Calliope went, but York was down to three on his HQ. Perhaps if all of the Calliope deployment effects went face, that it could have been sufficient. But I kind of forget where those pings went.
Gork not able to use the D-Bomber for lethal because of all of the spots being filled in his backline, and the units in the front line were actually not strong enough for him to actually make a trade that freed up a backline spot for him. So another conservative play to delay this game just a little bit, but it is definitely over. He puts out the J-Bomber rather than the D-Bomber, gets those suppressions and says, here's this 10 damage in my backline just from the Artie and from the Bomber. I don't think you're going to be able to take out either, let alone the 4/4.
Oh.
And then plus, of course, Gorky knows he has a D-Bomber. Ozzy knows he has a D-Bomber. So even if somehow this board could be overcome, the gas is in the hand.
Yeah, and we were potentially one turn away from a Panther D lethal. a Panther D lethal with blitz from the other German tank. It could have happened. Unfortunately for Aussie, it was not to be. York takes the first win on his US ramp list. Aussie has a pretty good idea of what York has remaining. Do we see the Japan list on stream next? Or do we save that one for last? What are you thinking here?
Yeah, it's definitely a hard choice right now. Really evenly matched players and really evenly matched decks almost. So what it's going to kind of come down to is these band choices and these deck choices, these order choices. What do I play and when? Do I get the matchup with what I think is maybe my
Oh,
weakest deck that I want?
let's go.
And here we are. For some people, this is truly the main event of
This
the
is
day.
why you were here. Oh man, and honestly, this might be the best matchup. This is the best matchup for the Japan list, not having to worry about as very much heal or fighters compared to the other Italy ally lists. This is the best matchup you would hope for Gork. So Gork is really benefiting from the deck selection phase.
Ozzy feeling a little bit of pain here as 2 matches in a row he gets Noxshib and both matches doesn't really able to make much money off of it, not making anything off of it in this one. But Gorky having to sacrifice a credit at the very beginning of this turn has to go with a whole credit slot to get rid of the Shub. So that is certainly going to change the pace of this game. Ozzy getting his 1/4 1 drop 1 off out really early in the game. That big 1/4 body. Uh, certainly a large body in the context of turn 1, turn 2.
All right, yeah. Um, I'd like to put some like meaningful insights out there, but I don't know. I don't know what to do. What's coming up. I mean, obviously, what you want to build up to is that one roof pop off. So I guess that's what we're building up to here.
And
I
Ozzy
mean,
would love to see an Aunt Frida here as he's got a pretty great combined arms type lineup here. He's got infantry, he's got tanks, he's got fighters, all ready to collect those buffs.
oh man, we see York lean into the monitor, saying, "I don't know if that's a good lean or a bad lean."
Gotta feel the heat from the glass.
The
Big
suppression.
suppress.
Ooh.
Really, really nice to suppress a credit denial tool. It makes him pay a deployment cost for it. That deployment, uh, not negative because you want to credit deny, but
Okay.
certainly something to be reckoned with. And then he doesn't get the cost reduction from the destruction effect.
Going
2
diplomatic
attaches to
attaché.
start. Actually, sorry, just 1 attaché to start the chain. Duty bound, the other card, both very red. So
We're looking at red cards. Red deck wins right here. This was the deck that started it all. No, it didn't.
it's
But
an 1 roof from Airland and Sea, but that's a little too far off. A 5th attaché, sort of interesting. Obviously, it would do 5 damage, or his 5th one would, but unable to really make too much use of that. Denied himself a couple times already, so already a pretty big credit gap here.
yeah, we're at 3 credit slots denied. That would be 6 credits returned from one roof, so it's already paying for itself.
A Sally in hand for Gork, so that is probably where we're going to see next turn take shape, take place. Yeah, the lesser of 2 evils is going to allow us to discard the Sally for some even more draw. Big desperate measures can be super helpful. And that second attaché for some easy removal. But right now, Gork only playing responses and unable to really develop a board, just really able to only response and, sort of
The-
running out of gas. Really, really bad Calliope there for Aussie. Needed a 50-50 to go his way, one of two chances, and they both did not.
Okay, we have a one roof locked and loaded.
Ooh, and if this Audacity hits the 164th, it's going to be pretty bad. It's going to be a buffed Artie
Yeah,
for Aussie when Gork only has 10. Yeah, it decides that is not having, not a 50-50 he wants to take.
if you play Audacity and then duty bound real fast, you could get the 4 damage to kill the Calliope.
Yes.
No, I'm just
You have to
kidding.
you have to get it in under a half second. It's really hard. Yeah, the 3
Pixel.
duty bounds not looking like a good time here.
All right, yeah. So we're looking at a hand that we're looking at a hand that oh, Anne is in the house. Desperate measures into Audacity. Is that 4
And
credits self-denied?
yeah, it works really well. He gets a good 50-50. You can see him nod there. He really needed that to hit the Artie. But this is going to be 4 out of the 7 damage right away that Aussie needs to put game 2 away. Calliope hits double face again, but this time it's the
Oh.
roll Aussie wanted for an exact lethal. Didn't necessarily need it. It seemed like that game was pretty much decided whether or not he got that. But after multiple, let's say, unlucky Calliope rolls, finally gets one to go his way in the best way possible. And we have a tied set.
Sorry, I'm
So
just
as you said,
thinking.
Corn, yeah, no, I mean, there's certainly a
York
lot
had-
of layers here.
York had 13 damage from hand. So potentially could have been lethal depending on what was ripped off one roof. So I mean that was very close, I have to imagine.
And you made the
Like how
point that might have been the best matchup for Gorky's Japan deck here. So how do you think it matches up going into a much thicker, much more heavy Soviet Italy?
so obviously the cruxes of the matter are going to be how much can Aussie heal and how much fighter presence can Aussie maintain. Um, it's going to be the two factors that I'm looking for. So York's going to have to go as fast as possible in terms of setting this up to limit what Aussie can do to kind of set himself in a Philly shell of defense.
Yeah, there you go. Decently quick start here for Gork. He's got some nice early plays and a huge sickle top deck for Ozzy. It's not going to prevent expansion. Gork is going to have the cavalry expansion play on 2,
You know what?
but still really useful and probably prevented a airland and sea on turn 2 as well.
I think that suppression of the 40th Cavalry from last game was so crucial that it could have saved the game. Preventing the credit discount of the cards in hand, especially the one roof. That could have been the one of the most important, one of the most pivotal points of that.
Ozzy just making a trade here with his mostly dead tank, putting on another SU and taking the damage, and then is going to eat a duty bound right away. on to that bomber to make a trade, and then we're gonna start getting in a little bit of burn damage, but a super early guards here.
Excuse me?
That's, he's playing OTK. There's a good chance he doesn't care, but like, my goodness, this is a large man.
Oh.
Yeah, you got to go face. I mean, I shouldn't say OTK, right? It's obviously not OTK, but it's certainly something where this is a thin, flimsy deck. This is a glass cannon, and we've got to burn you down before we don't have the opportunity.
Yeah, now what do you do? Like, you have 2 cards in hand that damage yourself, and you're at 5
Yeah,
5
absolutely.
HP.
Limiting Aussie's choices as well. And Gork only needs a single attache top deck. First attache has already been used, so second and third attache will be 2 and 3. He's holding 1.
Not only a top deck, but you could also develop one from Airland and Sea. So
Absolutely.
sometimes you just win the war through diplomacy, as we see York using diplomatic attaches. Oh, let's just go for it. Let's just put a fighter down. Let's say, hey, I'm dead in 5 turns.
Heading 4 turns now, baby. So 2 chances here.
Oh,
And there's the attache. He's
man.
able to just draw for it. He puts the hands up in a brief symbol of prayer. And a beautiful win by Gork, doing exactly what he wanted to do with that deck. Perhaps the deck that was maybe the hardest to win with, certainly the most polarizing as we went over before. But the win is in, and Gork only needs a win with a powerful German deck to seal his fate and go on to the finals.
Yeah, and that outcome of that game, I feel like if you were against that deck before, you still are now, and if you were for it, you still are now. I don't think any doubters of that deck were proven wrong, but some people just are stuck in their ways. But fortunately for York, he only has the German deck remaining against 2 Italy allied decks. And if you can get a fast start against Aussie, Aussie's going to help you. It looks like damage himself on that Soviet list.
Yeah, certainly multiple SUs and not really able to get, some really strong value trades out of that 4 health body means that you're going to pay health and maybe not necessarily reap any dividends. But as Starry so eloquently put it in one of our only previous match today, health is a resource, and only one of those 20 health resources matters. The rest of them are just sort of superfluous.
Yeah. Well, we're going to possibly see a Pedal Yakov down before Kaliup um, can pop off on that deployment.
As he's sticking with the Soviet deck, but at this point the choices are irrelevant. You do need to win with both of your decks against Gork's single deck, and there are no sort of tiebreaker situations from game score or anything like that. So Aussie losing 3-1 or 3-2 are, there's going to be no difference, and they're both going to feel just as bad here. So might as well just stick the deck, roll the dice, see what we get. Aussie has not found a fiat in that first game at all. Found Claim the Skies here, but still has not found a fiat to go with that Claim the Skies, and that is getting very, very painful. A single fiat could have changed that last game so much. He gets off any heal, and suddenly that attaché victory is so much more difficult to pull off.
Yep. The Zukov is finding the buff for the 12th guards mechanized. Interesting choice to not just frontline the mechanized. I mean, it was certainly in the cards to do. All
And
right.
picking up the sickle, really nice. And Gork has no problem getting the Calliope. proc that he wanted there. The one that he needed. Padoyakov into Claim the Skies, only 3 out of 4 damage there, so the Artie would live. So not a great move. Doesn't know that
Yeah.
Gorky has a Whirlwind in hand, so it would actually be a pretty terrible move, but we will... There's not much else for Aussie to do here. Maybe draw, maybe just SU.
I don't know if I've seen a 4th guard rifles come out as fast as it did last game. Like that was pretty quick.
Yeah. It was intense, it was frightening, and at some point it didn't matter, which is maybe the most frightening part. And we see here, as I said before, Whirlwind's not going to be terrible because it wouldn't get the kill, wouldn't be able to trade. But we are going to be able to get this Calliope all the way up to 4 damage, 5 damage, so no problem. And of course, the Calliope coming out before the Padoyakov. Gork able to get some really nice timed effects here where he is able to get some deployments before Padoyakov comes out and then deal with Padoyakov immediately.
Single copy of 10th Engineers Battalion, by the way. That was pretty important to have to get rid of the Padoyakov.
When another big board clear that Aussie was never able to find access to in the first game. Cards again, maybe even faster this time. Certainly feels less aggressive not seeing it in the front line.
Yeah, having it in the, starting hand or thereabout both games is certainly a great place to see it.
Maybe thinking about Zerstora this turn because next turn you could Panzer 35T, Aunt Frida, and then third Aunt Frida on the Zerstora to make sure that you efficiently get all of your buffs. But there's probably something to be said for moving the 2-3 into the front line to ensure that that 9-7 can't just advance and breathe down your throat.
Yeah, I mean, Depths of Winter is such a menace right now, but you would be removing your own 9-7, so I guess it's certainly a good card to just keep in the pocket as a break glass in case of Gork.
Right. And interesting that Gork does not take the front line and Ozzy instead choosing to play Korsuniak. I thought there was a case to be made for just Korsun and move up. So you are still guarded, but then presenting that 9-7 in the front line. But instead going with just a wild defensive shell of a 5-7 and 9-7 guard. Ooh, Breakthrough going to deny the draw and going to save us a lot of credits on operation costs. But we're not going to use any of them because we would just have to slam units into die. Breakthrough really just being used to deny the draw there, which probably seems like the correct move, right?
I mean, Aussie with the defendant Depths of Winter and the
Yeah, Engineer Battalion as well. So when the time does come, okay, goes Engineer Battalion now. I thought maybe he might save that for after the Depths of Winter play, and then can start just smacking tokens around to generate a quick 4 health, maybe even more, depending on what he had out before the Depths of Winter. But we see it just put him down now. If you're gonna try to eat through my gigantic guards, then they're gonna give me a little something something too.
Now I was gonna say the front formation too, coming. But this is the first turn we can see front formation. That's got to be pretty comfortable, knowing
Yeah.
for the rest of the game you get a free tank.
Really nice attack in the colony's top deck. Gork very specifically trying to maneuver his troops well using all of the Ant Frida buffs. But that means that he did not put the 35T and combined arms down after the Panzergren while the Zerstorer was out. And then the Zerstorer, being that big 7-2, able to be cleared with the removal. So now he loses his plane and he loses the +1/+1 buff. Ooh, Calliope, not great right here. Plenty of places for that damage to go. None of it really useful.
Yeah, some of it really bad too. You don't definitely don't want the damage to proc the passive effect of the opponent's tank.
Yeah, I thought, perhaps Calliope into 35T combined arms. Don't have the Zerstorer, but the Calliope will get you that little bit of extra. Perhaps setting that up for next turn. Noxia will enable the 35T, so even if that full front line gets destroyed, he'll still have that play available to him. But Aussie also sitting pretty at this point with a very nice defensive shell and holding that new Soviet card, able to just start generating tanks once per turn. Basically a win con if he gets that down with this kind of shell.
Yeah, I mean, unless Aussie just draws absolutely dead, and I don't know, it looks. I mean, those are probably the two best cards to have in hand at this moment.
Yeah, an excellent winter here offensive, and then an excellent turn 12 with Pedoyakov following that up. Could
Yeah.
also be extremely tough to deal with. Aussie thinking about it here, perhaps thinking about playing that now, but I guess the 35T being a 7-2, you have 31 health, so you're not really concerned about the 7, and 2 seems so easy to remove that at some point you maybe feel like Depths of Winter is low value here.
Yeah, I feel like front formation um,
Front
is
formation, and you can do 7 damage, and I don't really
yeah,
care. And then the first tank will trade, but I'm getting tanks forever, so.
yeah, and you're gonna get 1 health per turn as long as you have your engineer up.
Good point as well. And that is the line Aussie chooses to go with. A Panzer 3H going to be really nice for Gork because he needs an answer. Finds in your store for the last air support from Aunt Frida, puts down a 7-7. Now, looking like he's going to do some damage, but those tanks are coming. They're here to help. Holding a conditional guard, not able to do any self-damage to make that unit a guard, but certainly would like to.
Yeah, the self damage is gonna come from the front formation triggers.
Just takes a nice depth of winter here. That makes a
That's
lot of sense. Not
a
looking at your
massive
7-7.
winter.
Not looking at your 7-7. I don't want to look at it. Don't make me look at it.
And this guard is just going to win the game here.
Why is that 35T not getting its deployment effect? Oh, the Padoyakov was out. I'm a silly boy. The most classic of blunders. Yeah, and this
Light
looks
infantry.
incredibly bleak. Bleak, Gork.
Oh, big,
Down to
we
top
can do it.
decks. Suppression, no help.
All right. It's looking like it's
And
gonna be.
just tanks and tanks and
Oh,
tanks. I'm generating
wow.
tanks.
Ozzy
Oh,
is,
Ozzy even gives Ozzy with a soft
Ozzy is
whoa in the
hyped.
cam. No
Ozzy's
smoke without
hyped about.
fire. We're going to a final match to go to the finals. This is shaping up to be an excellent set.
Shout out Baron on the Sky Baron.
Okay, I was like, I don't know why I was shouting out Baron, but I love shouting out Baron. I don't need an excuse.
Oh boy. Gork is laughing it off. He says, "Ah, you got me." All right. Japan, Italy control versus German, US mid-range to make the finals.
And what a story it would be if Gork comes this close and is unable to make that final step into the finals, and it's not his Japan deck that is the deck he can't win on. It's a much more conventional German deck, full of the same Calliopes that have been so good so far.
That was a pretty good Aussie pop-off. Let me just
Yeah, absolutely. And we have, for the first time in early Fiat,
Yeah, duty bound on Fiat is kind of disgusting.
and we're going to see it right away. And we're also going to make sure that that Wirbelwind never really gets too pesky. Gork, how much plot armor do we have? All of it. All of it.
Boom, 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 boom.
No reaction from either player there. That was hard to stomach for Aussie, but he does so. No problem. No indigestion. Gork not even reacting to a beautiful Calliope.
That's a pretty beautiful knife for Aussie. I know it's not necessarily a knife, but table prop. That's a pretty nice one.
Man, a 25% chance like that for Gork to get that in the final game of a semifinal set, forcing an early dagger strikes as well. Some of Aussie's nice removal gone, and has no problem with a perfect turn 4 with just a nice plane, shipping up really well for Gork. I cannot imagine Aussie is happy so far with the way this is going down.
Yeah. So there is no 0 in this list, so there's nothing to worry about having a 0 in the World Championship.
Some have worried about that in previous iterations. A really nice hipper there. We're gonna take 4 damage, deny the draw, deny the credit. Aussie basically forced to make the exact same play.
You want to see me play Naichi? You want to see me play it again?
I was going to say the suppression here is actually brilliant. It's going to get him the card draw. It's going to deny the second Aichi from the destruction, and it's going to take the smoke screen away so that it can get 35 T'd. Just a 3-part decimation of that unit. Every single aspect nullified.
Right now, it definitely looks pretty good for York. I'm just going to throw that out there. Just looks pretty
Second
good.
Fiat, pretty helpful for a little bit of health, but the Restore is going to make sure that that's not really a big deal.
All right.
Ooh, a second dagger actually going to be pretty helpful. I would imagine. I do wonder if there is a way.
I'm surprised we let the Fiat live a turn, and this take liberty is going to be pretty important here to see what cards.
Yeah, I also thought that he would have gone for the trade as well. I was trying to see if there was something where he could maybe have lined up everything at 4 attack without the 164th to enable a really strong salvage play, but with the 164 throwing out the 1/1 after it dies, it basically made that impossible. Now we have a whole bunch of pieces of Aunt Frida.
Do you want to play Aunt Frida, or do you want to play Contest Doctrine?
Yeah, I think Anfrida is the move here, and then a really comfortable 6 damage, and then also, you know, knowing that you have the ability to put out tanks and then immediately buff them. I will say that the Decima ends up being a great play. That forces Aunt Frida's third form for a fighter to perhaps be dead in hand. We've seen both restorers already.
All right. Can Aussie find the tools to stay in this? The both Tagasaki regiments are going to be pretty good here, especially if they can hit some massive discards.
Yeah, and Shub actually pulling its weight this game in really unknown ways. Don't know that Gorky's going to make a ton of money off Shub, but it basically completely shuts down any on the ascent plays. Gorky doesn't have to worry about playing around that card at all while he has his Shub out. Go ahead and take Shub. That's a, you know, really powerful removal too. If you just want to waste it on my money machine, don't care about that. Of course, it doesn't look like any of this is going to matter.
Ooh, we were looking for the to the last man top deck.
Yeah.
I would have leapt out of my
True,
chair.
truly one off. He will draw up heavy, but there are plenty of ways to do 9 damage on the board. Oh, that's helpful, but still, unfortunately, ways to do 9 damage on the board. That will be it for Aussie Gorku going on to the finals here with just some ridiculous play. The Young Masters plot armor, not to be doubted. Some incredible draws, but nothing taking away from some incredible play and strategy overall. Congratulations to Gorku, our second finalist in 2024.
Yeah,
Great.
that was I was on the edge of my seat for that game. I mean, it sounds a little cheesy, but it was pretty exciting to see which way it could swing back and forth and what cards were being brought and are we going to find to the last man? Are we going to find this? I mean that Calliope to just smack the fiat on turn 3. I mean,
Absolutely.
wow.
25% chance of that happening. And if it doesn't happen, right, then immediately Ozzy has not only the trade, but like 3 or 4 extra health as well. So huge, huge, huge play. Really can't talk enough about how pivotal that rip was. Of course, to the last man could have been a huge save for Ozzy, would have made that
Oh
game
boy.
really, really interesting. Basically the only out there in the end, but unfortunately not to be. So we have our finals. If we want to throw up our bracket one more time, take a look at where all this progress has gotten us. We have Boker versus Gork for our 2024 World Championship. I cannot wait to see that match, but we have a great third place match between Dandelion and Aussie First, who have both played really, really great tournaments to get up until this point. And as you know, it's been said, the person who wins third place, actually the coolest guy in the tournament. That's true. That's a known fact every time, every year.
The third place guy is the one you want to hang out with.
So
No,
really,
yeah.
really excellent tournament so far. Please forgive us as we just make a mockery of what's left of this. But let's get it over to our last casting team. I'm sorry, not our last casting team, since we have 2 matches left. I'm ruining everything. Let's get it over to our casting team for our bronze match.
All right, thanks so much, Thanatron. Yeah, we're bringing to you our bronze match between Aussie and Dandelion, competing for the difference between $1,800 US versus $1,200 US, the third versus fourth place prize. So $600 on the line for this third versus fourth place game right here. Jaking, any thoughts going into this? I believe you're muted.
I sure am. Thanatron is not the only one ruining this. I believe the big difference between the players at this point, stepping away from just deck lists, which we'll take a look at in a second, I'm sure, is it better to be Aussie where you're coming off a game, you're warmed up, whereas Dandelion got quickly 3-0'd and then had to sit and watch this game 5 play out, this 5-game series, where he's just been sitting as he play and he's thinking about what he could have done different perhaps? Or is it going to be worse for Aussie because he just came off a heartbreaking loss in game 5 where he thought maybe he could have had just 1 or 2 differences between him being in the finals and having to go into this third place match? So to me, it's going to be very different to see interesting to see how different the players' mentality are, what their ability to bounce back from the losses. Because obviously nobody likes to play a third place match because that means you lost at some step of the way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, but let's take a look at both players' deck lists and maybe make some additional predictions. So first up, we have Dandelion coming in with 6,600 matches at a 65% win rate. All these players are top-level players between 60 and 70% win rates. Absolutely crazy to win 2/3 of your games. That's counting casual games. That's counting everything. So very impressive with the GPW favorite card. And let's see what Dandelion has for us. So again, we have this US Soviet tank-based mid-range using those 12 cards mechanized, and then continuing to use that card, we go to the Soviet Germany mid-range list, and then we have a Britain France mill list, which we didn't get to see last time because it was banned, and then a Germany Soviet mid-range list, again mostly tank based with those 12 cards mechanized. So 3 lists that are mostly doing the same thing, some combination of Soviet tank lists. And then 1 wild card with that Britain France mill list. So we'll see if we get to see it in this round or if it's again going to be banned. But yeah, let's take a look at who Dandelion is going against.
So, of course, Dandelion will be playing against the player we just saw in Aussie. 7,185 games in the year, 63% win rate. Very solid player. Obviously, we've seen him now on stream twice already, playing very well. I mean, we saw him play very well in a 3-0 victory, and we saw him play very well even in a 2-3 defeat to Gorku in the last series. So he's going to try to continue that level of play, but level of play is not anything on its own. You also need decks to back that up. So let's take a look at the 4 decks that Aussie is bringing. So, of course, he has that Soviet Italy control that we saw, taking down some very dominant wins, especially with that 4th Guard rifles. He has a Germany USA mid-range deck that we've seen from a couple different players, and this deck is proving to be pretty successful. Gorku in the finals with it, Aussie here in the 3rd place match, also with this deck, relying heavily on Aunt Frida. Then we have Britain, Japan, Air, just a very solid deck. Would not be that surprised to see if it gets banned. And then last but not least, we have the Japan-Italy control deck, the deck that raises the most question marks, the deck that's the most unsure, and the deck that failed to get across the line against Gorku. Will it be able to get across the line now against Dandelion? But overall, we see 2 mid-range decks, mid-range to aggressive decks, and 2 more controlling decks going up against Dandelion's lineup. I suspect that we're going to see a mill ban once again. What do you think, Starry?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the odd one out of those 3. So yeah, I think that it makes the most sense to ban the deck that is different. Either your lineup works against the tank mid-range, or it doesn't. None of them in particular feel significantly stronger than the other ones, and Brit always has the opportunity to go first, play some duty bounds, play some defeat and details, play some close air supports, and just absolutely high roll you. I mean, it's a consistent deck nonetheless. Like it's consistent whether or not you get that high roll. It's just the Brit is kind of like, if you get everything that you need, it's absolutely broken, and then if you don't get everything that you need, it's still like really solid. So yeah, I think that it's pretty safe to ban Brit. But we'll see.
It'll it'll be interesting to see if his thought process is slightly different, because we've seen obviously air getting banned with a lot of the players who are bringing some slower decks. But if you're Dandelion, you have 3 much more aggressive decks, a lot of tanks going around. Tanks have a slightly easier time of taking out these air units. So maybe you're more scared of a deck like Soviet Control, where it's going to be a lot of guard, a lot of healing, a lot of things to disrupt your ability to just slam down big tanks. So there is definitely that aspect to it as well, where it's not. In Dandelion's case, he doesn't necessarily have to ban Britain, whereas I think if you're Aussie, if you're looking at that mill deck looks frustrating and powerful into your entire lineup.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the Soviet Italy deck, I've been seeing it a lot over the last week. Very, very similar lists, and I know that not a ton of people brought it, but it does seem to be kind of refined at this point. It's definitely getting there, and I think it's a really, really strong deck. I think it has a pretty solid matchup into everything, just because of that front formation, right? Even Mill, which you would think would normally not be that great of a matchup, that front formation makes it a lot more competitive. It's definitely either player's game. Mill absolutely can get there, but yeah, the front formation kind of changes the way the whole deck looks. You have all the early game anti-aggro stuff, and then you also have the late game payoff.
Yeah, it's similar to Night Witches back in the day, to some extent, where Soviets are just able to generate that infinite value. And we haven't really seen that type of matchup play out yet. It's usually been Soviet control against some more aggressive deck, and Soviet control is just using its anti-aggro tools to survive. So it would be interesting to see if we were to get a Mill versus Soviet control matchup, but I do suspect that those decks, at least one of those decks, is not going to make it through. And we see it is always ban Brit, the Dandelion's Britain, France Mill, and Aussie's Britain, Japan Air are both getting banned.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't that surprising, but I think there's absolutely a solid case to be made for banning Aussie's Soviet Italy deck as well. It definitely comes down to one of those two, like you said. But it'll be
And
interesting to see which decks players want to start on. Dandelion, I think, you have to get a win with every single one, and they're all very similar. So
yeah, and we'll see how it works out for them, because these two players are also the two players who went 6-0 yesterday in 3-0 in the top 16 and then 3-0 in the round of 8. And now they both find themselves losing their first game in the top 4 of the semifinals and making their way down to the third place match. So obviously their lineups are capable of absolutely dominating. And if you're Dandelion, you're probably looking at the deck list of HQT, who we saw Aussie beat 3-0 yesterday. And if I recall correctly, HQT was just running that Soviet German tank deck over and over and over and couldn't get a win on that. So if you're Dandelion, are you thinking about that? Are you thinking like, oh man, I just saw somebody playing the same decks as me get 3-0 swept by Aussie? But on the flip side, if you're Aussie, those games against Gorky, there was definitely a few tilters in there. His mentality might be a little shaken at this point. He's gonna have to show some real fortitude. If you're Dandelion, maybe you're cooling off a little bit from the Spoker series, but I can speak from experience that having to play a second series immediately after coming off of a loss in a first series is a difficult thing to do.
yeah, especially when it's that close and that so many decisions were decided by like Calliope in particular. It's definitely super frustrating to be locked in and spending all of your energy on every single decision. A 5-round absolutely brutal series. You think about every single tiny little thing you do, and if you're Aussie, to kind of say, okay, I can think about that later, but right now I need to have my head in the game. It's a difficult challenge, and it's a challenge that a lot of players kind of struggle to overcome.
And I think it's a very good thing that we're seeing Aussie starting here on the Soviet Italy control. I think this is his strongest deck into Dandelion's lineup, and I think that he has a very good chance of winning this game and turning things around from last year, just starting off with a solid win on a deck that he seems very, very comfortable on. I think is just the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, having that Zhukov into the guards mechanized, I really like it. It allows you to trade off with your opponent's early game units, and because you're on the play, You might even get a chance if you draw a tank to trade off some early game units. Maybe you have like a 2-1 mechanized, play a guard, suddenly it's a 2-2 again, and you're drawing 2 cards. I mean, it'd be really nice.
Huge draw of War Machine from Dandelion on his turn 2, and he is going to be incredibly thankful that he does not see a Claim the Skies coming out. Obviously, Fiat and Claim the Skies is one of the powerful reasons that Italy is being chosen as the ally. And if you go first, it does give you the opportunity to take out these 12 mechanized before a tank can come in. Dandelion, though, seeing that there was no Claim the Skies on the previous turn, is choosing to greed out a little bit and get additional veteran triggers off of the only 4-attack tank currently in his hand in the form of that Hellcat.
Yeah, and these operation costs on both these units are their biggest downsides. I mean, the balancing factor in Fiat is 1000% that deployment effect. Like, if either of those cards had sorry, not deployment, operation cost. If either of those cards only had 1 operation cost instead of 2, you could just take out that 3/5 really, really nicely with that bloody sickle. But yeah, I mean, cards do have to be balanced. So
And absolutely huge turn coming out here from Dandelion. He's going to be able to take out the Petliakov. He's drawing 4 cards. And of course, all of his units are, well, in the case of the 12 guard mechanized, they are growing from 1/2s to 2/2s. In the case of the 269th, it's actually shrinking from a 3/5 to a 3/4. But I don't think Dandelion's going to mind too much given the situation. And he can also follow it up with a Greyhound, which will operate for free as well if he just wants to get additional cards up to the front line. And it looks like that's what he's going to go for.
yeah, and Aussie doesn't have the key guards that are gonna be necessary to hold this off. For Aussie, the big thing is just working with a lesser with less credits. That War Machine on turn 2 for Dandelion is so strong, allowing to completely refill the hand. So yeah, we'll see if Aussie can find a way back into this. Aussie will be able to trade off and then trade off again now that these 2/2s are back to their regular size.
Yeah, Aussie finding a very good way to sort of plan his way through that turn with the credits, get the engineers down first to ensure that he gets that immediate healing, trading off his 12th guard mechanized. And oftentimes it's plays like this that might seem very simple, saying like, oh, you just simply make the trades that leave your units alive, you trade your low health units into their high attack units, that type of thing. But honestly, getting through all of these trades where there's just so many options. He can get down an SU 100. There's a sickle at play here. Maybe he wants to trade off to try to set up a dagger strikes. There's a lot of things that to be doing on these types of turns. And that's something that I've just been very impressed by Aussie throughout this entire tournament is just his play on the Soviet control, really showing that he understands this archetype really well. Because control is not something we've seen in cards in a long time. So it's definitely not a play style that players are used to.
Yeah, for sure. This SU 100 is really nice here. It is gonna allow you to eat probably 2 units, if not more. You aren't gonna be able to get the mechanized off of it
Ooh.
anymore, but
Dagger
yeah, I mean,
strikes.
Dagger Strike seems good.
It won't destroy the M10 though because of his SU. It will only pin it, and I think I would have to imagine Aussie was assuming it would be destroyed because there's no Blitzkrieg in the deck from Dandelion. It is just USA Soviet, so there's not that much of a worry of having this on board. I'm surprised we didn't instead see an alternative play such as SU 100 trade out the 12th guard mechanized.
Yeah, Dandelion smiling at that play. Thankful that Dagger Strikes is not actually going for a kill.
Regardless of whether or not from Aussie's perspective, that was a mistake or not, maybe he just didn't want that 5 damage connecting to the HQ. From Dandelion's perspective, he clearly thinks that that was a mistake because he's very happy with the outcome of that play.
Yeah, Dandelion has a really big board, but yeah, go ahead.
The hand here from Dandelion, though, is starting to dry up very quickly. 3 war machines and 2 1/64ths. That is not going to have any impact if Aussie is able to trade out this board, if he's able to find one of his AoEs, if he's able to just find a few big guards that are going to eat trades with these units. This second we can do it, though, is going to be huge in keeping what is already on the board alive. And of course, Dandelion does have quite a few big draw cards in his deck that he is going to be potentially able to find. But at the moment, it is not looking too good for Dandelion. Strategic Focus pickup is good, but it's not going to clear anything right now just because of the high health of these units.
Yeah, but the Corson is really nice. I was thinking to myself, okay, if I'm Aussie, what am I searching for? What am I digging for with this mechanized? And I would say that the two cards that stand out to me are Depths of Winter and Corson. Corson obviously doesn't necessarily trade super greatly into this M10, but it at least soaks up enough damage. And it's very, very cheap to get out. It's pretty solid. Aussie unfortunately doesn't have any great plays here. You can go for Deichima and hope that they don't have like an M10, but that seems
There's two more
super
M10s
risky.
in the deck for Dandelion. And if you're Aussie, you're looking at Dandelion's huge hand. And Dandelion's been playing very credit efficient so far, so there's no real read on what types of cards are in this hand, other than they are worse than second Hellcat 2 We Can Do It, which is basically the best thing you can be doing. So these cards in his hand could be anything from Aussie's perspective. If he had just a sickle in his hand, he could ping his own SU, get it up to 8 attack, and trade out both tanks, but that's not really something in his hand, and there's no way to draw into that. So he's instead going to get the Petliakov down on board. This is good because it now shuts down all of those deployment effects. Dandelion top decks strategic bombing, though. Not quite lethal, but he will be able to trade out the Petliakov. And I think this just has to be strategic focus 97th. You're not dead on board. He's one credit off being able to do Machi, claim the skies, and attack. He instead is going to guard up and claim the skies. This is a solid play as well. It gets him board presence, and it leaves a very similar amount of damage on board. The Sherman's going to come down to see if it can reach for that final bit of damage.
Yeah, I mean, Dandelion is looking at those triple war machines like, well, this is kind of awkward. But to Aussie, that could be literally anything. Obviously with Soviet secondary, you don't have Blitzkrieg, which is like the big thing that you think of whenever you're playing against Frontline. But there are definitely cards that do a dang good job of looking like they're Blitzkrieg, whether it be the SU or whether it being some very nice Blitz tanks. So yeah, I am curious if Aussie has sussed out that Dandelion doesn't really have all that much going on in hand. Because Dandelion definitely has been going towards buffing the things that are on board, developing the board, instead of like playing new units to the board.
And
But there's
Dandelion
the
picks
M10, and that's
off the
it.
second M10, and that's game one. And this Soviet deck has been one of Aussie's best performing decks. It's one of the decks he's looked most confident on. And imagine how shaken he must be after losing that game against the US Soviet deck from Dandelion, which is a deck that we've only seen 2 players bring to this tournament, and one of them was Killswitch, and from what I heard from Killswitch, that deck he lost 3 consecutive times on yesterday. So from Aussie's perspective, you feel like you've probably favorited that matchup. You feel like that's your best deck. That maybe is even your opponent's weakest deck. And you lost that game. That must have Aussie very shaken. We'll have to see if he can bounce back from this. And if you're Aussie in this situation, what do you think he just sticks with Soviets? We've seen him stick with the decks that he lost with previously in the series against Gork, but do you think it's any different now?
Yeah, absolutely. And my reasoning for why is that the other decks that Dandelion has don't have US, and one of the things that US does really well is suppression. And so Soviets obviously really struggle with suppression. That's one of the reasons that they were in a kind of not so great state for a long while after Winter War. Basically, most of the past year, Soviets have been one of the weaker nations. But yeah, without suppression, Soviets are crazy strong. So I am kind of surprised here to see Aussie go for the Japan deck instead, but you know, best of luck to
Perhaps,
him, and I hope it works out.
yeah, perhaps he just realizes that, well, my opponent's last two decks are nearly identical with German Soviet tanks, Soviet German tanks. So I have to win with all three of my decks against these decks, which are almost identical. I might as well start with Japan. At this point, maybe he's just resigned into thinking, like, well, if I can't win with Japan, I can't win, so I might as well run it at this point. And, I mean, if Dandelion can get this win, I think, obviously the series will continue, and Aussie would have the opportunity to reverse sweep, but I just have to imagine that if Aussie's not able to carry this game out, then how do you... I don't think there's really much recovery from that point. Aussie already looking perhaps a little defeated on the camera, but maybe that's reading a little too into it. Raiding Brigade with three very solid options as to what to remove. He picks the Shub, which I think is the correct call because it's going to set up this on the Ascent. SU coming down, triggering the Veteran effect on the 12th guards and refilling the hand. And Aussie leaves the front line open on the previous turn, not pushing up with the Raiding Brigade, and that in fact induces Dandelion to push up the 12th guards and walk straight into Aussie's on-curve Winter Regiment, which will get hit by the Hipper.
Yeah, Hipper is not really what you want to see if you're Aussie. Hipper is such a strong card against control because having the tempo lead when you're playing a mid-range deck against control and suddenly they're down a unit. I mean, Hipper basically just says take an extra turn, and that's pretty crazy.
And huge play here from Dandelion. Getting the attack buff and the heavy armor on this SU is going to be able to hit the Takasagi. Attacking the colonies follows up, but it only removes one of the two tanks. And there's no tanks in the deck of Aussie to trigger this salvaged 12th guard, so he just is going to push that up. And if you're just looking at Dandelion's hand, he has all of the tools to get across the finish line. He has the new elite Panzer Grenadiers, he has the Blitzkrieg, he has a Panzer 3J late for more burst, he has dive bombing to get through another guard. He just simply needs a few more turns, a few more credits to be able to play all of these pieces, but looking at Aussie's hand, he's going to be able to put some effort up, but he needs some big draws quickly to be able to answer not just the power level of Dandelion's hand, but also the size of Dandelion's hand at this point.
Yeah, Dandelion has all of the gas in hand. Aussie does not. However, Aussie does have the Winter Regiment, which could be really effective, specifically with dealing with this Panzer late. The Dechima taking out the SU could be really nice.
We see him giving some thought as to which of the tanks to take out with the Dechima, because obviously the veteran effect on this Panzer J late can be very scary, but Dandelion is simply content to just sit in the support line and play out this Panzer 3H, look for more cards set up. At this point, the thing he wants most is likely just some form of operation cost reduction, a 269th, or preferably a Greif at this point. That's just going to help him get up all of these tanks to the front line for cheaper and set up a big Blitzkrieg.
Yeah, I mean, if Dandelion can get that critical mass of units in the front line, that Blitzkrieg is going to be very difficult for Aussie. Aussie just doesn't have the guards to really prevent that, and doesn't really have the ability to push stuff up to prevent it. It would be really nice if you could get this on the Ascent to actually hit something meaningful, but with 3 1-drops on the board, that seems extremely unlikely.
At this
Dagger
point,
strikes, okay.
yeah, you can take out the Panzer J late, and I think Aussie realistically needs to find a take Liberty. I think that might be his best option, so perhaps he should push up the recon. He is going to do that, holds onto the Winter Regiment.
Yeah, and I like getting rid of the Out of the Mist, because, or sorry, using the Out of Mist to get rid of the Jaeger Regiment, One, because the Jaeger regiments are a great way to turn off Dechima, and having less things to throw at it means that, you know, obviously you can still turn it off with the other Jaeger regiment, but just having one less thing that you can throw into the ambush is nice. But yeah, this pack 40 gonna eat the recon, which is Aussie's only form of draw here, and one of the ways that Aussie was hoping to get back.
Yeah, Aussie's play with just pushing everything up to the front line, it's making things awkward for Dandelion. He's not closing out the game. He's finding it difficult to get units onto the board with just being stuck in his support line. But Aussie could only hold up that position in the front line for really 1 or 2 turns. And after that point, his hand is just essentially empty. Like, the tools in his hand are not going to be able to answer just the wealth of options in the hand of Dandelion, and this Blitzkrieg is going to be coming out in 2-3 turns, likely to close out the game unless Aussie can dig his way out of this.
Yeah, Aussie has no way of clearing that pack, and as of right now, the pack eats literally every single thing on Aussie's board. The Winter Regiment is it's gonna have to put in work if Aussie wants to stay in this game. That Winter Regiment.
He can kill Jaeger with Dechima and then salvage his own Dechima with Out of the Mist. Instead, salvages the Raiding Brigade, keeping the ambush guard, but similarly getting a tool to take out this pack 40. And I really like that from Aussie. It's a very heads-up play. It shows that he didn't just bring a weird deck. It's a weird deck that he's very, very comfortable on. He's you know, he's seen that these more difficult to catch lines using the cards in not the way that they're typically used for, because honestly, this deck doesn't even have that many targets for salvaging your own type of cards. But in this situation, it works out really well at taking out the pack 40, but it does not get him out of the massive pit that he's currently residing in here.
Yeah, I mean, all we can do is see what Aussie draws here. You know, we'll see if Aussie can draw something like a 2 last man or some other way of combating this inevitable frontline push that's going to be coming from Dandelion.
Dandelion committing another unit to the board, potentially into a to the last man from his perspective. We do not see that from Aussie. So he's just going to throw up 2 winter regiments to the front line, delay a Dandelion once again. But this actually might still be lethal. I believe this is still lethal here for Dandelion. I'm not sure exactly what the credits here are.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to
It's
play
exact
both
lethal.
Warble.
It's exact lethal here. 25 damage.
Oh, and there you go, getting that buff from that Panzergrenz. Yeah, I didn't even think that the Blitzkrieg changing that completely changes how that goes.
That's just devastating for Aussie. He's now lost 3 games in a row and has to beat Soviet Germany 3 consecutive times if he wants to finish 3rd place in the 2024 World Championship. And if you're Dandelion, what a bounce back. Losing 3 games consecutively to start off the day, now bouncing back is 1-2. And
Yeah,
doesn't show any signs of stopping. The Soviet German deck's not particularly different.
no, I mean it's almost identical to the German-Soviet one. I think Aussie is probably questioning right about now what, you know, was it smart to take this Japan-Soviet list, even though it looks like he's really comfortable on it. The question is, you know, is it a good meta pick, right? I think that the deck is super creative and definitely could be very powerful, especially if you're comfortable on it. But the question is, was it the right choice into this particular meta?
And we see, actually, despite the 212 mechanized in the hand, we see Aussie actually on the bottom on his Soviet Italy control, using these 12 card mechanized with the SUs as a bit of card draw. But if he can't find those tanks soon, his hand is looking potentially very small. On the flip side, Dandelion, very, very solid hand. A lot of different options and just more options starting second here. But the +1/+1 on the 97th due to the Zukov is going to prevent the Panzer 35T trade. Picking up the 4th guards on turn 2 off of Zukov, very huge for Dandelion here. And then he sickles, looking for a SU to play on 3, and that's exactly what he finds. So Dandelion getting rewarded for not just simply going for the 35T on 2 and keeping it back. I really like this from him. And on the flip side, Aussie gets down the Petliakov. Unfortunately for him, it's going to prevent Dandelion from dealing damage to himself.
Yeah, this Corson coming down on potentially turn 4 is pretty nice. It's gonna trade really nicely, and if you can get it down early enough, you can prevent any sort of frontline pushes from Dandelion. So we'll see how that works out. Dandelion just developing these SUs. I mean, what do you think about SU? It went from being a card that people thought was like kind of bad to a card that was played in pretty much every deck just because of this mechanized.
And not just the mechanized, but also SU itself was buffed heading into this expansion from a 3 health to 4 health. And the 3 to 4 difference in damage or in health is so big because so much stuff does 3 damage. Carpet Bomb does 3 damage. Attack in the Colonies does 3 damage. There's a lot of Jaguars buffing its units up to 3 attack a lot. Whereas 4, there's many fewer things that deal 4. And with a 3 drop that can only really be traded out by 4 drops, it is absolutely huge, on top of it now triggering one of the best cards from the expansion. And
Yep.
things have turned around quite quickly in Aussie's favor. This is very reminiscent of the board states we saw of Dandelion on these tank decks. I think it was Soviet Germany specifically against Spoker in the semifinals, where he was just playing down SUs. He was like playing down big targets in the support line, but it was never particularly threatening because Spoker would have an equal amount of stats of various guards and bombers and other units in his support line, and he would be comfortably sitting at 20 plus health. And it just never felt like Dandelion's units did anything. It would just be he'd play a big unit, and then Spoker would play a big unit. And a similar thing is playing out here with Aussie now creating a similar hand size, triggering his own 12th mechanized. And the deeper this game goes, the more Aussie's more expensive units in his control deck are going to just simply start to overpower Dandelion's units, which really cap out at about 4 credits outside of this 4th guard, which is already on the board and injured.
Yeah, so on one hand, these mechanized, you have to push them up, on Aussie's last turn because you really don't want to let your opponent's units into the front line, especially not taking 5 damage to your HQ. But on the other hand, you'd really like these 2 mechanized to go into the same unit. Like you'd either like both of them to go into the SU, or you'd like both of them to go into the big infantry because then you could like sickle it. So just having the damage split like that is like giving up value, but the problem is the alternative is A, letting big things in the front line, and B, now suddenly your support line's super clogged. So it's a really difficult decision to make that might not be super apparent if you're not the one in the driver's seat.
Well said. And the state of the game is once again starting to turn a little bit towards Dandelion, just looking at the hands, because this KV off the top comes down. It's going to start dealing steady chip damage. The Engineers is suppressed, so the immediate health gain has been turned off for Aussie. And suddenly his hands starting to look a little bit questionable. The Naval Brigade off of the Heroes of the Soviet Union is good, but he doesn't have the credits to be able to take out the KV this turn with it.
Yeah, and can you imagine if Dandelion is able to kill that 5/5 infantry? I mean, you're drawing 3 cards off of KV. So that's 6 damage right there. Then you're eating another 3 damage just from the effect of the card itself. And you basically cannot let that 5/5 die, or you are going to be in deep trouble.
And we see a big reaction out of Aussie. It looks like he might have come very close to running out of time, perhaps not very happy with either the units he played or with simply just the placement. With the bomber being on the far right, makes it a lot harder to defend on future turns. Also, the Petliakov coming out shuts down his own naval brigade on the following turn if it remains on board. And that's the struggle of control decks, is you have a set amount of time to make your turn, and when you're playing a control deck and you have a wealth of different options in your hand, and you know finding the proper thread through the turn is the difference between winning or losing a game, suddenly that amount of time you have to make your turn feels a lot shorter than it used to. I've definitely been in this place myself many a time. And although Dandelion's playing a much more aggressive deck, he also has a wealth of options at this moment as well. And he's running down the clock thinking about what the best way through his turn is as well.
Yeah, and just getting these 2 units to the front line, taking out the Pelyakov. This is going to be very, very difficult for Aussie to get out of.
Aussie playing this next turn much faster than his previous turn. Although to be fair for him, his line this turn is much easier because that Pelyakov was removed, which from Dandelion's perspective made a ton of sense. You have a bunch of deployment effects in your own hand. You want to get rid of a bomber that can just damage for free. It unlocks this Naval Brigade for Aussie, takes out the KV, but this is not going to take out the 35 Ts and the Blitzkriegs in hand, which is going to be enough to just end out the game. Dandelion taking it 3-0 over Aussie, showing his dominance on these decks, going 3-0 in the 3 sets that he played, not against Spoker.
Yeah, I mean, both of them played really well. Obviously, you have to play really well to get into this point. It looks like Aussie is a little bit downtrodden, which does make sense, but you know he did play excellently. So yeah, Dandelion comes in with the 3-0, which I mean, Dandelion has been all feast or all famine so far throughout this tournament. But I can't wait to get into our next final match between Spoker and Gork. Sorry. But yeah, absolute congratulations to both of them. Both of them are taking home a significant amount of money. I mean, $1,800 to Dandelion and $1,200 to Aussie. So maybe Aussie can go out for a nice meal or something like that tonight. Yeah, huge accomplishment either way, and really proud of these players and excited to see what comes next today.
All right, so let's pull up the bracket one last time to see our finalists here. Spoker versus Gorku in the grand final. One of these 2 players will be crowned your 2024 KARDS World Champion shortly. And to help me walk through this finals, we will have Bubbles. Bubbles, what do you think?
I'm excited. We've got there. It's the grand finals. We've got some good decks to watch, and hopefully, I'm hoping for a long series. I don't want a 3-0. I want to see these players really battling for it and going at it back and forth. I want it to be very much unclear who's going to win this series until the series is over. But yeah, I think we've seen a good chunk of the deck, so we know what to expect from each of the players. But it's going to be interesting to see how their decks interact with each other and sort of what is the priority in this series. What are you expecting?
Expecting a hard-fought match. Both of these players, although we did see a bit of an anomaly with Spoko taking it 3-0 over Dandelion, that seems to be maybe more, it suggests more about how Dandelion's results than anything else. But otherwise, Spoker and Gorky have been fighting back and forth in all of these sets. Gorky in particular, back-to-back 3-2s in the round of 8 and then the round of 4. So I'm expecting this back and forth. These players are very evenly matched. Obviously, these were 2 of the favorites headed in just based on previous results, and now they're here in the finals with 4 very proven decks.
So I know you had your concerns about this Japanese-Soviet deck from Gorku. Has your views on it been changed at all, or do you think this is still most likely his weak point in his deck lineup?
So I am very much not a believer in the Japan-Soviet OTK deck, however you want to label it. Personally, I think the deck is incredibly weak. I think the deck is incredibly inconsistent. With that being said, you only have to win with it once. And Gorku has proven that he is more than capable of winning with this deck. He's done it 3 times already, because I have to imagine this deck has not been banned in any of his previous series. So the fact that he only needs to win with it once, and there's a few slower decks coming out here from Spoku, decks that are not going to be able to close out games quickly, but at the same time, decks that aren't necessarily going to be able to rack up a ton of health very quickly or consistently either. And these decks are going to be giving Gorky potentially the matches that he wants to more easily get that Japan-Soviet deck across the line.
So, I mean, some of these slower decks are ramp decks. Do you think here for Spoker coming with ramp decks, this mulligan and the way you approach these matches, if you're against this Japanese Soviet deck, is going to be much different to how you'd usually play it? You might focus more on healing and these defensive items, or you might even focus on just trying to be as quick as possible and close out the match before Gork can get this this OTK combo off. So, if you're playing one of these ramp decks, how do you approach this Japanese Soviet deck?
I think there's a few different ways you can play out the game, which is why it's going to be a very interesting match if we do end up seeing it. Because you can go for the B-24Js to suppress the 40th Cavalry, and that will shut down basically all of Gorky's credit cheating outside of one roofs, but that's stopping that reduction of cards in hand is going to make it much more difficult for Gorky to burst. On the other hand, B-24D can just simply go over and past all of Gorky's units and end the game out in just a handful of turns. These Glamour Boys are going to offer you potentially the ability to out-heal the burst range from Gorky's deck. But all of that being said, Gorky does run cards like Type 94, and Duty Bound, while it can be played later in the game for your burst OTK turn, it can also be played earlier in the game to just put out pressure. So if Gorky simply goes first, starts with a Cavalry Regiment, and then plays 2 Duty Bounds, bumps that up to a 5-4 unit, and we could just see Gorky simply winning on turn 4, going the more Jagro stance. So in the mulligan, Spoku needs to make sure that he does have some stuff to be doing early. He can't just simply be keeping production orders and Glamour Boys thinking about how to win later in the game, because Gorky was going to have the opportunity to just simply play the deck differently than he would otherwise.
And for Spoker's lineup, obviously we have the bans, always ban Brits, staying strong. So that's going to be the Brit ramp deck banned, and then I believe the Gorku Brit deck is a another ramp deck, right?
Yes, I believe that both of our players here each have ramp decks, but why don't we take a look a bit deeper into the lineups that we have here today. So let's start with Spoker, player on the left, first player to make it into our grand finals. And looking at his decks, of course, we're not going to spend too much time on these because we have seen them already, but that first deck, it is the Britain USA ramp deck. Unfortunately for Spoker, this deck is not going to be allowed to be played. I believe this deck might have even been banned in all 4 of his matches, players not liking Britain. But fortunately for him, he has his second deck, which is a USA Britain ramp deck, a mirror of the previous deck. This deck relying a little bit less on big units, a little bit more on that early game, that early credit game, and that is going to help him out in the matches that he has against Gorky here. His third deck is the much talked about Soviet Germany tank deck. And we've seen that this deck fail. We saw, obviously, Dandelion struggle with this deck in the semifinals, but we've also seen this deck absolutely dominate with Dandelion's performance in the third place match. So a very powerful deck, much more aggressive. And then last but not least, Spoker has just simply Jagro. And we've seen a lot of Jagro in this tournament. We haven't seen Jagro do particularly well, but we're going to skip past the games and get directly into game 1, which is going to be the Japan Mirror.
And the Japan Mirror is interesting because you might think these decks are identical, but I think as Japan Mirrors go, they're pretty far from identical. Obviously, these decks both have early units because that is what Japan excels at. But the way they're hoping to close out the game and play this mid to late game is going to be very different here. Spoker going to be trying to put down aggressive units, but then also buff these up with the Ant Frieda, whereas Gorku is going to be trying to buy time a little bit more and try and combo off. But do you think there's any possibility for Gorku to focus less on the combo in this matchup and just focus more on playing for regular board control like a traditional Jagro mirror?
Absolutely, he's going to be able to buy much more time than he might be otherwise able to against other decks, particularly with this mixed regiment, this one cost 2/1 salvage blitz unit, because the units you're going to be salvaging are also 1 cost blitz units, and most of the units in Spoker's deck are going to be 1 cost, and they're going to be, or 1 health, and they're going to be in the front line. So there's just going to be it's going to give Gorky much more ability to keep Spoker out of the front line, and both decks are reliant on expansion. Gorky less so, with obviously many more other tools to draw, but Spoker is quite reliant here on the expansion to draw, so Gorky might be able to buy himself more time fighting for this.
We see
line.
this 58th Infantry Regiment, which has shock and plus 3 attack or shock, so it's very good at being aggressive and trading. But this mixed regimen, like you said, it's such a good answer for cards like this because you just get to steal it, and then you can also use it to trigger your own expansions. Audacity coming out could be a little bit of a problem. You may need to use some diplomatics to deal with that if you want to not sacrifice a good chunk of your board to get rid of it. But then again, you may just choose to leave it on board because it is quite expensive to operate.
Yeah, and it very much is ruining Spoker's curve here. Obviously, he has the Restore to play out on turn 4, but that leaves Gorky with another unit in the front line. We see another expansion coming out. 2 duty bounds getting picked up here.
Do you just take the face damage? You could double buff up your cavalry, and you could do a substantial amount of damage to the HQ. With 2 diplomatics in hand, you could be looking at closing out a lot quicker than is usually expected.
And it looks like that's exactly what he's going for, taking the 5 damage now. In his mind, Spoker almost certainly going to have to trade out with this Restore, also getting up the Type 94. Now, Spoker does have a suppression in his hand, so he can play this out, remove the buff from the 15th Cavalry. Obviously, that is a card that you would also like to save for the 40th Cavalry that could potentially come out. But at this point, you need to stop taking damage.
Winter Regiment could also be a very relevant card here, as a lot of these little Japanese units, when you steal them, they're almost carbon copies of what they were before you stole them. And unfortunately, someone has turned Spoker's lights off, so it might be a little bit difficult to navigate in the dark. However, still able to see his computer screen, luckily. Now, like you say, that suppression, a very, very tempting option, makes these trades incredibly easy. However,
Yes.
Winter Regiment also a very, very tempting.
There's so many different lines you can go for here. He looks like he's going for the Winter Regiment, just going to trade off the Restore. This is the line that I prefer because you have that second Restore in hand. This way you prevent any additional damage to your HQ while developing the Winter Regiment. And Gorky is yet to yet to remove any of his own credit slots, so this one roof is simply just a very expensive convoy at the moment. Finds what I believe is his 4th expansion, so he no longer needs the front line.
And he's just doing so much damage already that the inevitable sort of OTK seems easier and easier when your opponent's on sort of half health already. Like you say, he's not removed any of his own credit slots, but often in a self-credit denial deck, if you can get to the mid-game without needing to remove your own credit slots, then it means you can remove 1 or 2 credit slots per turn at pretty much no cost, and it makes your one roofs very easy to reach sort of that 6 to 8 mark where you start profiting credits.
That's a very good point. And we see Gorky choosing to drop the second diplomatic into the Aichi, not counting on that desperate measures to take it out on a following turn, deciding instead to value his own HQ total. And here Spoker, he needs to try to end out this game as quickly as possible, but how do you do that? The answer he sees is getting the Aunt Frida to buff both the Winter Regiment, but also the salvaged type.
Though there is the answer available for Gorku. If you remember, he salvaged earlier this infantry that has +2 attack when shocked, so it will have 3 attack and just instantly kill this unit at a very, very small cost for Gorku.
And as we've mentioned, Gorky not denied any credits so far, but with 2 air, land, and sea, 40th Cavalry, and 2 one-roofs in hand, things are going to start to get very crazy very soon, especially if this 40th Cavalry goes off, which is why I imagine that we are going to see it suppressed.
You have to suppress this. If this destruction effect triggers, it reduces the cost of each card in your hand by 1. And with Gorku's hand, that is essentially game over. We can see air, land, and sea, air, land, and sea, desperate measures, and then you still have the credits remaining to then start playing these one roofs. And you can expect Gorku to be able to find a way of ending the game on that turn with that sort of combo. So you cannot allow this 40th Cavalry to die with this many cards in Gorku's hand. When your opponent has a couple cards in hand, you sort of want to kill it straight away to minimize the credit reduction they get. But here we go. The suppression comes out with a Restore for the extra draw, and now a strong front line being built up here. But Gorku does have some answers to deal with it. Will be able to clear the board.
And that's a very powerful turn here from Gorku. And Spoker's Spoker was very much starting to piece together the ability to end out the game in just a few turns, but Desperate Measure's Audacity is going to flip that entirely on its head, reset Spoker's board, and now you're on 11 health. Gorky's now removed 2 credit slots, so these 1 roofs are on gaining 4, which means he can airland and see 1 roof next turn to already start to gain credits on the 1 roofs.
Shinano coming out, getting rid of that pesky bomber. And Spoker's board may have been cleared 7 times, but he's built it up 8. And now
He
we
is
see
spamming all the airland and seas.
the combo popping off. A lot of credits available here for Gorku. This could be it. There's 1 diplomatic.
But
He's still going. He's
has it
got
already.
money.
He's confident in
There's another
the
1
combo
roof.
potential. He
12
has basically
credits for
infinite
each.
credits.
He's got this. He has to have this. There's no way he doesn't end
8
the game
damage
this turn.
Finds any additional damage output.
He's playing
he
cards
got it.
quicker than I can read them. There's another 1 roof. The credits.
And
Oh,
Gorky just showing his confidence on this deck, confident that, you know what, I don't need to just start picking up damage pieces. I'm just going to continue picking up 1 roofs, picking up airland and seas, because I'm going to reach a critical mass where I'm going to have 24 credits. I'm going to have access to my entire deck, and that is going to get me to those remaining damage pieces to get out the damage. And Gorky, once again, proving me wrong and getting the win with his Japan deck first. Getting that through the gates, not leaving it to the end. And if you're Spoker, how defeated must you feel already?
so for those that are slightly lost with what happened there, these airland and seas, when you play them, they develop a card from your deck, which generates an extra copy, which means these 1 roofs, you can have sort of 4 or 5 of them in a single turn, and each one can be generating 10 or 12 credits. You just have so many resources to spend, but you also get so many cards to use. And I mean, at that point, it was just how many cards can I play before the clock runs out? Now we see Gorku bringing out the Germany-USA and has a very, very aggressive hand.
And this hand is going to be able to answer anything Jago can put out quite easily. The 164th immediately trades out the cavalry. There's Jaegers to follow up if there's another 1 health unit pushed to the front line. And then once he hits turn 3, this Calliope is going to absolutely destroy Spoker's board.
We will have Spoker's hand for you in just a moment. And going for the full freedom, making sure this unit isn't able to be killed by this 35T. And Spoker's hand, not as aggressive as you would want in this scenario. Getting this expansion off might be quite difficult. You may even have to rely on generating a unit out of the Mist, which obviously salvages a Japanese version of the unit, which can then be used to trigger your expansion. But 35T with operation cost, these slow fighters that are really mainly there to stop these ramp decks, as it stops all countermeasures being triggered, which just stops first responders straight away. But still, this hand here for Spoker is so slow.
And this is just brutal. Jago can look like the best deck in the game sometimes when it just simply wins on turn 4. But sometimes your Jago hands look like this, and suddenly it just feels like...
He's got to float the 2, right? You just got to float the 2 credits.
Yeah, I can see the argument for playing down the 35T. But you're almost certainly playing an infantry, so the cost to operate it if it's going to the support line, you're just simply going to have to pay that anyways. The Calliope coming out and actually going straight into the HQ, 164th coming out. This is going to give Spoker a target for the 35T and Jaeger regiment, but that's also not something that Spoker wants to do, because that's going to leave Gorky with a 3-5 artillery. So Spoker looking at maybe the Panzer Grenadiers, maybe trying to take out this Calliope before it can get buffed on the following turn.
But this engineer is a blast from the past, giving +2 attack to adjacent ground units. Now, I haven't seen anyone doing this combo on ladder, but Gorku bringing it out and making this Calliope absolutely deadly. And unfortunately, my pronunciation has been infected by you.
There's been a secret war waging within the casters on the pronunciation of the Calliope throughout this entire tournament, and it seems that Calliope has slowly gaining ground here. just as Gorku is gaining ground into the support line, or into the front line with this 164th, the Jaeger, the engineers sticking around in the support line.
This is the situation where you needed desperate measures. Gorku looks like he noticed something bad there. He seems to have messed something up, but what do you think he's unfortunate about there?
Perhaps
He's
the positioning of his units. Perhaps he's realizing some play that Spoker can do in regard to desperate measures. At this point, if you're Gorky, you're thinking about, how do I lose this game? Obviously, we have Spoker's hand, so we see that it's definitely Gorky's game to lose at this point in time. But if you're Gorky, you're thinking, well, if my opponent has desperate measures and then also a different card, but Spoker just tears through the front line, reaches the support line, takes out the engineers, but does not take out this Calliope, and that will be using up the last of his blitz tanks with this combined arms still sitting in hand, and this Aunt Frida with still yet to be even playing the first stage.
Now, Gorku, it still has a strong board. And this Calliope is going to be very difficult to deal with. This is the kind of situation where you wish you were still using Sendai, but unfortunately Sendai has just not been as popular these days. You're not able to raid and brigade this. You are able to use an Audacity if you can find one, buffing it up with another Aichi on board to do 5 attack. But no matter how you approach this, it's a tricky tool to... it's a tricky nut to crack, and the tools to do it are not available for Spoker.
Spoker is capable of getting this expansion off finally, and it seems like that is the play you kind of have to go for at this point. I don't see what else you can really go for in your hand.
It's just unfortunate because you know your units are just going to be destroyed straight away. Is that?
Oh no!
He didn't go for it. So the line we're seeing here is you go for this combined arms and +2/+2. You're able to take the trade on this unit in the front line, move up. You have the credits to play expansion, but Gorku instead able to capitalize on this.
I'm not sure if Spoker's realized his mistake yet. Maybe he doesn't know combined arms can target non-German tanks. Maybe he was just miscounting the health it would gain, thinking that it would only gain the 1 health and would be trading anyways. But Gorky, recognizing that my opponent likely has at least 1 expansion in hand, perhaps 2, I just need to keep the front line 35T 164th joining Calliope up there.
Now the board is just being swamped by units here from Gorku, and Spoker in a very difficult position. This hand is just essentially useless right now. None of these cards do anything here for Spoker. And we can do it, making this board so difficult to deal with.
That should just close out the game, because it gives him the value trade on the Zustore. It gives him a draw. It gives him additional health gain. So Spoker just, what do you do from the situation? We also see the Comet in the hand from Gorku already.
In Winter Regiment, normally a really powerful find in this matchup, but it's just too little, too late. We saw that slow hand from Spoker not working out for them.
Aunt Frida finally getting an infantry to be able to be played, but now there's no tank to be played, and this Calliope still cannot be removed with 8 health.
I mean, you can get a nice buff here with this stolen 164th. But
attacks with Aichi first, we can see it's starting to fall apart.
No!
He's upset, and Comet is just going to come down and end this game immediately, put Spoker out of his misery in this game too, and give Gorky the 2-0 lead.
So it was possible to survive an extra turn there. If you go for the 164th play first, you buff up your Aichi, and you just sacrifice it to clear the Justora. But no matter how you handle that situation, you're almost certainly going to lose, especially with a Comet available. And we are not taking any breaks whatsoever. Straight into the next game, Spoker giving it a go with the Soviets, and Gorku onto their US Brit ramp deck.
And Spoker has to beat US Britain ramp 3
This is a
consecutive times.
slow hand. You do have this War Machine, but you've got a Halifax and a P51 available in hand, which is not what you want in these quicker matchups. However, you may better just buy enough time, especially if this War Machine.
Yeah, with the Bomber Mafia pickup, it's not going to be too significant now. Another War Machine is going to get him closer to that Bomber Mafia. But unfortunately, Bomber Mafia only dealing 2 damage by itself. Most of the units in Spoker's deck will have more than 2 health.
You expect to see this War Machine come out straight away, or do you get this armored infantry down to start trying to trade and clear the board, and it forces Spoker to move up to the front line, or you will get this Sherman off?
I believe you go for the armored infantry, just simply get units on board. That's what Gorky goes for.
I really like this unit. It feels really powerful. You get a reasonably statted unit, a 4/4 for 4 with 1 up cost. It's nothing to go crazy about, but it's certainly good enough. But then you also are guaranteed extra value. You can get this M4 Sherman, which is an extra unit on itself, but also can generate even more draw. Or you can potentially buff up a big board of Shermans, especially if you have some Calliopes on the board. It can just be a really powerful card. So I really like this guy, and I'm happy to see him getting play in these sort of ramp decks as well as frontline decks.
Broker here really struggling between the decision of which SU to play. He decides on the 5/3, knowing Gorky does not have access to strategic bombing yet. There is no Carper bombings in his deck. But the RAF Lightning is going to come down as a substantial tempo swing. It does leave the BT7 on the board for 1 more turn.
But realistically, you can expect to deal with this BT7 before it becomes a veteran. And even if it does become veteran, you're in a healthy spot, so you're not too worried about it. Now we see Spoker putting back down these tanks.
12 guards is going to give him the card draw, but now Gorky is going to have the 6 credits. We see that he does not have strategic bombing currently in hand. Spoker is going to take that risk, preferring to get the SU that buffs and gives heavy armor off on a wider variety of targets.
Gorku, able to establish the front line and ramp this turn, could also establish this artillery. However, considering the speed of Spoker's backline with this tank, I would much rather just see ramping and, moving units into the front line, establishing a solid board, rather than relying on cheesing out the game with artillery.
He's going
Goes
to
for
go
it.
for the Calliope. He does not win the 25% chance that we saw him win against Aussie. Does not take
I
out
don't
the...
want to say that was very predictable, but that was a very predictable outcome.
Chooses to gain the B24D instead of taking the front line with this 4/4. And that's a very interesting play to me, because now it gives Spoker the ability to keep this tank on board. And from Gorky's perspective, at this point, your health total, you're risking just dying to Blitzkrieg.
Yeah, you are in a dangerous spot here, and this Panzer J can hit the HQ this turn as well. You can move up the 5/2, get this 35T down, move that up, play the Panzer Grenadier, move that up as... Oh, I'm going to go for the Panzer J first. It doesn't matter what order you do it.
Yeah. And he could just put all of that to the HQ, drop Gorky down to 5 health. Alternatively, he can use the shock attack on the veteran version of the Panzer J late to take out this Calliope if he's worried about getting the artillery sticking around. But
Yep.
at this point, I feel like you can comfortably just send everything to the HQ. Gorky only going to have 7 credits. There's no Carper bombs to worry about. If worst case is Glamour Boys and Gorky
Goes for the
trades 1
trade.
unit, pushes 2 units up rather than goes for the 35T.
I like that. If you find a Blitzkrieg, having these little Blitz tanks in hand, really, really important. So I'm happy to see these being moved up. This guard is also very nice at slowing down Gorku, because this artillery piece is gone. And we're going to be able to see a Bomber Mafia next turn, so Gorku just has to buy as much time as possible. However, it might just be too slow.
And if the supply priorities is for damage, it heals him 1. It takes out the RAF Lightning in the process, though.
There's the Blitzkrieg!
And that's just lethal. 35T Blitzkrieg. Spoker
holding back
a
the
game.
tanks. We spoke about holding back the tanks for the Blitzkrieg and finds it. Gorku just took it a little bit too slow. Maybe that Calliope was the nail in Gorku's coffin, and Spoker able to take a match for themselves. They know they're against this ramp deck every single game now, so they have their choice of matchup. If you're Spoker here, do you think you're bringing this Jagro deck or this ramp deck?
I think I would personally, I'd go for the mirror, but honestly, there's not a big difference between it. Spoker is going to bring this Jagro deck, his third chance to win on Jagro, and this is probably the matchup he's looking forward to the most. And Gorky, once again, going to just have to full mulligan and hope to find it. He's thinking about keeping research, almost certainly to just be played immediately on turn 3 for the death charges. The issue is Jagro, it doesn't work the way it used to. Jagro now has bigger units to play. If you just simply play out a death charges early, Jagro is fine to spend that time to use all of their credits to develop one larger unit. So Depth Charge is a powerful keep. It's a powerful card to play on turn 3. But you would definitely rather just have a War Machine. And
we see the first responders, but look what's in Spoker's hand as well, this Sayun. So if Gorku plays this first responders on curve, it could potentially be a dead turn.
And there's also the suppression, so even if this Scion gets removed and the first responder is held up on a following turn, Spoker is just going to be able to put out as much damage as he wants.
You have to go for the Calliope.
Yeah.
The Calliope.
Spoker walks straight into a Calliope. Certainly aware of this possibility, but you're not going to not play cards. He does have the response in the Radiant Brigade, and this is going to be an infantry to stick around for the 35 Ts. And if you're Spoker here, if you see float 3...
You have to play this Sayun here. You cannot.
It's why it's in the deck. It's also establishing a fighter that is difficult for Gorku to remove. It's going to set up your suppressions.
But maybe just going for the Justora, you have this suppression in hand. If you go for the Justora, you let Gorku get this this first responders out. You say, that's fine. It's only going to be a 1-5 anyway. But Gorku able to punish it with the Wrath. And now Spoker feeling like a little bit of a silly goose.
Yeah, and he can still just replay Justora, go for the suppression. The Justora fits nicely on the board, but we see Gorku picking up both Bomber Mafias in hand, and the Engineers Regiment is going to give him a little bit of healing as well as the credits to get closer to those Bomber Mafias. A second first responders pickup.
Are we going to see a second first responders activated against the Sayun? You have to play it this time, surely.
Your opponent doesn't attack with Wrath Lightning, doesn't push the 5th Brigade, you have to play Sayun. This is the most telegraphed first responders possible. However, maybe there's a little voice in the back of your head saying that Spoker is simply baiting me into a strategic bombing.
Or even then, part of me goes, I could do a lot of damage this turn. If I just greed out, I could do a lot of damage. And it looks like we're going to see that. If Tank Maneuver comes out here, this is Spoker going for the damage line.
Is he going to go for the expansion as well now that he has the front line? He does not have a large number of units, but he's going to go for the Type 93, just output more damage.
Brings Gorku down to 10, but here's the other first responders, and there is not a suppression available. One turn off these Bomber Mafias. Gorku's hand does not look too strong, but they have a powerful board. They are able to trade away a lot of these threats. Can remove the Type 93.
He can be comfortable starting with a convoy in this
Absolutely.
situation.
Now you just need to buy time. Going to clear a good chunk of the front line. That's a lot of stats in the front line as well now. That's 7 defense in the front line for Gorku. That is nothing to sniff at. Jagro has a hard time eating through all of that, while also having units left over to sort of take advantage of the front line. It is possible, but it will be Spoker's entire turn.
Spoker needs to dog with expansion this turn. He recognizes the situations he is in. That's exactly what he goes for. And Gorku can play Bomber Mafia. It will take out 2 of these units.
I think the nice thing for Gorku here is if you play Bomber Mafia, there's a good chance Spoker now over deploys on the board, seeing that Bomber Mafia has come out, and then when the second Bomber Mafia comes out, it can be a really, really devastating blow to Spoker. We're gonna see it.
Oh, he picks up Havoc, and that will let him take out the Zustoro to ensure that this 5th Brigade does not just get immediately removed. Ensure there's no fighters on board for this third piece of Aunt Frida.
You could even establish the front line with that last credit, move up this 5/5 5th Brigade into the front line. You can clear the board, establish the front line, and it's not impossible for Spoker to come back from this situation, but it is certainly a strong foothold for Gorku.
And now this is why it was so important for Spoker to go for those 2 expansions last turn, rather than trying to get any extra damage, rather than pushing the cavalry regiment. Because if at this point, if he had 2 expansions in his hand, the game would just be over. But because of that play he made last turn, a very heads-up play, he is still in it, and he top decks the second suppression. It will remove the attack from this 5th Brigade, not the health, so maybe he even saves it in case there's a Glamour Boys.
I would be very tempted to save it. There are very few units where this 1 attack actually means any different to 5 attack, because you've got so many 1 health units. The main advantage of playing suppression right now is just to get that card draw.
And he gets the Saiyan on the board. I really like this. Saiyan survives through Bomber Mafia, and because of its additional text, it can't be removed by this 5th Brigade. The Calliope top deck, though, is huge.
This could be massive.
If it double hits the HQ here, regardless of which... Well, you have to start with Bomber Mafia. You don't have the credits to play Calliope first.
You absolutely have to start with Bomber Mafia. You have no choice but to begin with Bomber Mafia, at which point you can go for the 50% chance of killing the Sayun, or the 25% chance of killing the Aichi.
He only needs 1 hit into the Saiyan, so it's actually going to be a 75% chance.
Oh, you're right. Yeah,
to kill Saiyan,
75%.
but we've seen Calliope do some crazy things, but not for Gorku. Gorku is able to bend Calliope to his will, takes out the Saiyan, but he's still on 10 health with no healing.
There's a lot of potential damage here coming out from Spoker. You've got 10 health, 2 Type 93s in hand, you've got a 15th Cav and a 35T. I think there's a world here in which Gorku just gets burnt out. You don't know this if you're Spoker, but Gorku's hand is actually quite a slow hand. You've got a lot of tools in closing out the game in Gorku's hand, but you don't have that many defensive tools available. And we're going to see.
Goes for the expansion. Picks up another 35T, and another Aichi is going to be huge with both Bomber Mafias now gone.
Goes for the trade.
Calliope. He's worried about the just Glamour Boys shutting him down and Calliope farming him. He's seen both Bomber Mafias. Gorku has strategic bombing in deck, and that's it. But Gorku finds a third Calliope, I believe, now.
But where do you target this? Do you go for the HQ to try and take out these Type 93s? He's going for the HQ. He's going to clear one of them. And I think you have to take that. You have to be happy with that. But now has to figure out how to survive. Now, Spoker, I believe, going to output a lot of damage on their turn.
And also look at Spoker's deck size. He's gotten 3 expansions off. He's drawing through a decent chunk of his deck. Suddenly, these outs that Spoker's looking for are becoming more and more likely to be drawn each turn.
Signal Regiment. A huge find. Gorku is going to have to suppress that if they don't want to be burnt out.
And with Aichi is another target that Gorku is going to have to suppress, and with the B-24J can only suppress one of them if Spoker correctly positions these units.
Considering taking out the bomber, but I think face should be the place.
At what point do you make the read that my opponent doesn't have Glamour Boys? Surely he would have played it already. Because already on this turn, Spoker was 3 damage off of just being able to kill him, but he plays both units on the same side.
This means the B-24J can suppress both of these in one move.
And he sees it in hand. This isn't hidden information. Spoker, the moment is getting to him. He's crumbling under the pressure. Gorku goes for it.
Gorku saying, is there something I'm missing here? Or has my opponent just made a massive blunder? Now, you can use On the Ascent to refresh your Signal Regiment.
certainly can, and that's exactly what he goes for.
Can put you down to
And-
1.
Gork isn't going to have
No.
his support lines full. With Cavalry Regiment, Gork doesn't have a way.
You're right. He can't heal. He's got no
He needs to
space.
draw, but there's no draw.
There's nothing he can do. He is trapped. Trapped in the
Gorky was
support line.
pulled
Has
this
to kill a
game back.
unit. There
And
is God.
There's nothing to do. Gorky realizes that he's figured it out. He drops the emote. We are headed to a Game 5 in the finals of the KARDS 2024 World Championship. Gorky is just going to send it all HQ, and it is going to end with a USA ramp mirror.
What a finish to that match.
And you can see it on Spoker's face. You can see what that game means to him.
And that will take us to a ramp mirror for the grand finale. Best of 5. Someone is taking it home with this one. I mean, these ramp mirrors can be very, very drawn out. Sometimes you're trading blows for, 20 or so turns until one of you finally just runs out, and we could be in for a long one here. We'll give our players a moment to collect themselves. They've been in and out of these matches at lightning speed. No time for drinks, no time for breathing. But now we'll take a second, we'll collect ourselves, and then we will get into this. And here we go. Good hands for both players.
Starting first, both players picking up War Machine. This is not just going to be a game decided on terrible draws. Gork already considering keeping this production order.
But I believe this War Bonds is very relevant in this matchup.
No.
Gork has a super ramp hand, but nothing to do with it. They're going to need to find some payoff, so they are quickly going to run out of resources. This is foobar indeed.
There's only a handful of differences between these players' decks, and one of those differences is Spoker runs 2 MI5s. And we already see one in the hand. Gork picking up a convoy, but his hand is definitely going to be under pressure here.
And I expect to see an MI5 coming out. Gork's hand getting from small to smaller. However, they do have the credits to play absolutely everything they find, continuing to not find any real value or pressure tools, instead finding ramp and anti-aggression cards. However, they should have some time to search through their deck and establish themselves. These matchups, they're not over in an instant.
Holds up
Spoker
responders, but that's going to do nothing as Spoker goes for the War Bonds.
Well, Freedom is a nice find, able to cycle. Finds the War Bonds of their own. Starting to look slightly better for Gork, but still, Spoker's hand is just absolutely massive, and they're under no pressure whatsoever. There we go. We go for another War Bonds. We put out the Calliope. And now...
Oh, this is where things start to feel really bad if you're Gork, because you can't just Hellcat into the HQ. That you're not going to win that race. Calliope takes out immediately. But if you spend 5 credits trading 1-for-1 with Calliope, that's...
I believe it should be Glamour Boys. Just put down the Glamour Boys.
Yeah, and say, I need to draw into other cards. I need to draw into my Bomber Mafias. I need to draw into my production orders.
But Spoker's hand looks absolutely deadly. Full of value, full of, these tools to keep you alive. You're not worried about it getting rushed down. You're not worried about losing the value race. And we see this Armored does buff up this Calliope to be a 4/6. Bomber Mafia is an excellent find, but it might be too little too late.
Picks up the B-24J and the Banshee. Neither can remove Calliope this turn, but both offer the abilities to answer it to some extent. B-24J can be picked and played immediately to at least reduce its stats, and that's what he's going to go for. But Spoker, with a production order of his own in his hand, almost certainly going to be picking up a B-24D and trading that out.
You could also just go for the Wrath Lightning and go for the tempo hit.
There's even Bomber Mafia double for freedom on Calliope to bring it back up to a 2-4-6. And that also lets you trade out the front line and take the front line with your own.
You
and
also
that might
just
be what he's going for.
Go for the strap bombing. You've got the strap bombing. There are no ends to Spoker's options here.
Second production order picked up Gork is already on the back foot, and Spoker, he's been playing this US-Britain ramp deck all throughout the year. He was the first player to bring it. He's the player who has continued to bring it over and over, even when other players stopped. So how fitting is it for this to be the finals where they're in this mirror and Spoker looking good? Does Gork have what it takes?
I mean, there is certainly the potential in these decks to swing these around. You get some good Halifax procs, you get some good Bomber Mafias. You know, it's certainly not over yet, but Spoker having the upper hand in more than just one way.
Now, what does he go for? This is, even though he's clearly in a better position, this is not an easy turn. Because your opponent has a lot of stuff on board, and you don't have an easy way of removing it. There's Bomber Mafia and Raph, the Glamour Boys, back to just buy yourself space.
I mean, the most important thing in these sort of scenarios when you're ahead like this is to not get ahead of yourself, to play properly, to respect your opponent, and realize if you do these sloppy plays, the game becomes losable very, very quickly. So you really need to be careful because you're only in a winning position so long as you don't make errors throughout the match. The moment you start making these mistakes, your opponent can crawl back into it. And before you know it, you've lost what was unlosable.
I really like what Spoker's doing here. He's just saying, you know what, you don't have the stuff you have on board. It's there, but it's not that threatening. I'm just going to buy myself time. I'm going to draw cards. I'm going to gain more credit slots, and then I'm going to look for something else to do. But the supply priority is coming out, healing the units back to full health. Raph Lightning going to block the potential bomber.
Now, what are you looking for here if you're Gork? Do you look for the ramp? Do you look for the research? Do you want this sort of these big bombers, the Bomber Mafia? What are the key cards available here that Gork is going to be looking for to bring them out this game? I believe there are also 2 more convoys available in the deck.
Yeah, there's 2 convoys. Research for either, of course, the nuclear bombs try to end out the game. If he's able to get a little bit more chip damage in, that can end it out fairly quickly if Spoker's not able to heal, but obviously we do see 6 pieces of healing already in the hand of Spoker. But also, he can do research into penicillin and rebuild his hand and then continue to use that to fight for Boyd. But the other key cards he's looking for is the bombers. One of the other differences, one of the cards that Gork has fit in where Spoker has an extra convoy, where Spoker has the MI5s, Gork has a copy of the Halifax. So a well-timed Halifax in conjunction with a production order can put out a ton of damage quickly, but instead we see another first responders.
And if you're Spoker here, what is your focus on? Are you just trying to clear this board until Gork runs out of resources? Or at what point do you sort of flick this switch and start trying to beat down the HQ to close out the game before Gork can try and find an out?
At this point, you should be entirely about damage mitigation. You want to take as little damage to your HQ as possible, and if that means taking a slightly slower path, focusing on trades rather than going for the HQ, that's just what you have to do, because at this point, Gork has a minimum amount of damage that he's able to put out, because it will be nearly impossible for him to stick units. So he's going to have to rely on the nukes off of research. He's going to have to rely on the B-24Ds just getting their one attack in with the blitz. So as long as Spoker can keep himself past a certain threshold of HQ total, there's simply not going to be anything Gork can do to come back. And it looks like Spoker is leading for that, using the supply priorities to take out this Raph Lightning that was blocking the bomber.
Now, holding back the gunship mission, do you think this gunship being held back and going for the supply authorities is because gunship is better at taking out these beefier bombers where you need the extra damage? Or is it more that this can just is more versatile? You can hit the HQ with it, you might need the healing later on. What is the main reason for holding this back for now?
At this point, I'm not entirely sure myself. It could just be thinking that 2 targeted damage into the support line is just going to be more important than 1 damage everywhere. Because at this point, Gork is going to be playing from the support line for the rest of this game.
Another MI5 available for Spoker. If Gork doesn't find a card they can slam on their turn, then I believe it should be put back into their deck.
Spoker is sending that bomber to the HQ, not removing the front line, deciding that this is the point where he's going to start to put on the pressure. The Calliope and the Albacore, these are amazing cards against the Jagro decks, but this is not a Jaguar deck from Spoker. This is his ramp deck, and these big bombers, the B24Ds, could even potentially set up a 2-turn lethal if that's what he wants to go for. A P51B, another massive draw.
I mean, at this point, it just seems like a matter of time until Spoker can close out this match. Convoy and Bomber Mafia might be strong options to try and buy some time here.
If Spoker goes for the trades and Gorku finds research off the top with 15 credit slots, he can go from tier 3 research into a nuke on the same turn. And that's his out B24D that is not going to be setting up a 2-turn lethal. So if research comes off the top this turn, suddenly things are actually looking very good for Gorku.
But it's just supply priorities. And he has to play it. If you don't play it, you're going to get hit by the MI5 and it gets put back into your deck.
And if you're Spoker, you can already feel that. You can feel the win. You can feel that giddiness rise.
This is it. This is the final turn
of work all coming to this. It's all paying off. There's no card in Gorku's deck. It's the Glamour Boys.
Spoker's going to take it. Spoker is the 2024 World Champion. Going for the ramp mirror in the best of 5s. Gorku had such a strong start here, but Spoker able to bring it back and take a 3-2 lead.
And look at Spoker's face. Look at the emotion, the excitement. We see the thumbs up coming out of the shadows from Gorku. Yankee Doodle Doo from Spoker. He is the 2024 World Champion. And what a comeback. Going down 2-0, losing rough games on that Jagro to start off that match. But showing the determination, showing that his decks are built. He has the plays to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly thought Spoker's going to take a game, maybe try and take 2 games, but I don't see any world in which Spoker can reverse sweep this, but just comes back so strong and fights with everything they got. And I think that ramp mirror is where they could start to see the light at the end of the tunnel with that strong opening hand. And unfortunately for Gorku just finding those triple war machines, setting them back so much value. And yeah, congratulations to Spoker. It's a huge win.
And this absolutely is Spoker's moment. He is the world champion, and that is going to be what people are talking about for the entire next year of KARDS Esports. But let's not forget the other players who got here. Maybe we can even pull up the bracket, but while we're just talking about it, Gorku went up 2-0, dominant wins to get here, close fought, but very dominant, showing he has the skill and just not making it across the finish line. But this was an amazing tournament from Gorku, definitely rising his name up the ranks of the top players here in KARDS. But these are your 16 players who made this tournament happen.
Yeah, and we see here Gorku taking 2nd, Dandelion taking 3rd, and Aussie taking a solid 4th. So, you know, top 4, I've got to be very happy with that, but I think top 16 should be very happy with where they come as well. It's difficult to get this far, and I mean, it's difficult to prepare for. I know preparing for smaller tournaments is nerve-wracking as it is. You put so much energy, but you have no idea what's going to work, and I think it's very impressive, the decks we've seen this weekend. There's been some very creative decks, and it certainly opened up a lot of doors in how we're going to be playing KARDS over the next few months.
And this is a tournament unlike any other, where this isn't just simply running back the same decks that everyone has 1,000 games in on ladder. There's also an element of deck building in here, and that's where you saw quite some wild decks, especially Gorku showing us with that Japan Soviet, making it to the finals, showing that that deck has what it takes. But really just a match of deck building, of playing, of skill, of metagaming, figuring out the bans, figuring out the counters, figuring out the order to bring your decks in. All of these pieces came to play, and these players, both our players in the finals, Spoker and Gorku, showed a mastery of all of these skills, and Spoker just having a slight edge here in the finals, and that's the small differences in play is what matters when it comes down to competitive esports. All of these players in the top 16 were amazing in their own right, but Spoker showing that he has the edge here today. And I mean, he absolutely deserved it. You can't say that Spoker did not earn his way into this tournament victory.
And I believe we're going to get a couple of co-casters on here to give their thoughts and opinions. In a moment, we should be joined by Thanatron and Corn Guy.
What a match.
It's your
We're-
guys' turn now. We've done our talking.
No, we're still in
Yeah.
stunned silence. Really, really, really excellent play. Everything that we saw today was incredible. Big ups to Spoker for taking that out, taking that win, and big ups to Gork for a really, really well fought second place. He both lived and died by the Calliope in the end, which was absolutely wild. To get that 25% in one of the earlier matches, that was such a huge turn in the semifinal. And then to play with it so well in the finals and get that lead, and then in the end, just not what he needed at all to avoid the reverse sweep. Wild stuff.
Corn Guy, anything to add onto your fellow Jehovah's Witnesses' thoughts?
No, we are not Jehovah's Witnesses. We're just professional
Yeah.
looking. But I mean, watching that, the roller coaster of emotions from the players, from playing as Gork, getting a huge statement win with your questioned deck, and then going up 2-0. You have to feel so good, and then even seeing Spoker make misplays or less than ideal plays, and then seeing him still be not punished for it, and then from Spoker's perspective, going down 0-2, but coming back, like this wave of emotions. That's what I was focused on, is how like these players have to be experiencing so much, and just that journey, that narrative of the emotions, that had to have been incredible, especially feeling awful as Spoker, being down 0-2 to coming back to win. That's got to be great. And for Gork, being up 2-0 and then losing on the ramp list, as he did, that's got to leave something to be desired. But we saw a thumbs up from him from the shadows. He looks like he is it's not the end of the world for him, but he is still happy to be in second place.
And J King, being the person who's been in that big C, I think the most, how can you add on to that of how it feels when you're in that grand finals and things might be going wrong? They're not going as you planned. Your opponent is getting that big edge up on you. Is there anything you can add into sharing how that experience feels or what that's like?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point that Corn Guy brought up, is that Spoker did make some mistakes in this final set, but that doesn't take away from him as a player, because I certainly remember in the 2021 World Championship against Darkness, I remember being there in the set and realizing that I made one small mistake, and that one small mistake cost me a game, and that brought it to a game 5. And just that feeling deep inside of you of just, I am the reason this set is still going. I'm the reason that this scoreboard is no longer favoring me, or it could be favoring me more. And having to sit with that, but then come back and then continue to try to put on your best show in the next game. Improve your play moving forward. Don't let that sit with you. Don't let that sort of start to build into a narrative of how you're playing, but rather build off of that. Because we saw Spoker, the first few games did not go his way at all. There was definitely some bad draws against him, some solid top decks, or just RNG in the favor of Gork. And we saw visually with the cameras on, we saw Spoker start to get tilted, and as he started to get tilted, he started to make some mistakes. The quality of the play started to slip a little, but he turned that around. And then the final game, he played a masterclass on that USA ramp deck, and I think that just shows the resilience it takes to be a world champion.
And there definitely was some play on both sides that, I would definitely wouldn't call anything an outright misplay, but you could certainly call questionable. In that last game, right, Gork playing against ramp, chose not to play a milk truck with 3 credits left early in the game. He chose to hold up the first responders, knowing that he was playing ramp and was against an empty board. that early in the game, Ramp's not playing 2 units, right? Like ever. Ramp's only ever playing 1 unit. So at best, your best case scenario, you're playing a countermeasure that costs 3 for a 1k unit plus 1/1 with like I guess maybe blitz because it's on the off turn. But like that's not a good use of that card at all, especially when you had a chance to ramp out another credit. I don't think that that play served Gork well in the way that that third game went. So certainly there were some great things, I think, or great capitalization on some of those plays in that third game by Spoker as well. So there was definitely the pendulum was swinging sort of all over the place with some of the plays, which goes to J King's point of how hard those final games are and how just the amount of ripple effects from those micro decisions can really cause a whole host of issues or opportunities.
I mean, Vanatron, you've played in the top 4 worlds as well. How difficult did you find it when things weren't always going perfect to reset yourself, not just in between each match, but within the same match to try and pull through and give yourself the best odds? What was that sort of like from your perspective?
So there's definitely something to be said for having a short memory, right? If you watch any kind of like professional sport or anything like that, you'll see a lot of guys, maybe they'll make a big mistake or a big blunder. And the first thing that people say, right, is like, he's got to forget that one, got to have a short memory. And I do think that that's important. But there's also something to be said from learning from your mistakes within a single set. So it's definitely a balance to basically use any blundering that you may be charging on yourself as both a learning experience, but also not something that you are blaming yourself for or causing or allowing to change your decision making or change sort of the thought processes that got you to that edge of the tournament. So it's definitely very, very thin line to find.
Awesome. Well, I believe we should have a winner's interview, so we will be sending it to Starry, who will be sitting down with Spoker.
All right, congratulations. Absolutely fantastic job. So I have a couple of questions for you. Give me 1 second. So,
Okay.
where are you from?
I'm from China, and I'm now in university in Beijing.
Oh, very cool. Would you like to thank anyone?
I want to thank many people, including you,
Oh, thank
our
you.
and the ones who hold the contest and who contribute to the contest and give me a chance to uh, have this champion. I'm very happy. I'm very appreciate you. And second, I appreciate the players who played with me in the game very much, and including Tang Tang. He's the best one I have seen. I
Yeah,
can see.
Tang Tang is, or Tong Tong is pretty great. Yeah.
And the Gork
hmm
and Non 5, Dandelion, Arts, HQT 18, many people. And I appreciate the game very much because it make me acknowledge so many people and some of them in Beijing, and we have met each other.
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah, you have a good team. You have a good team. You have a lot of
Yes.
people to help you. So, how will you spend the money?
Um, I think I will have a big meal with my mates, with my cards mates, and I may have a travel next year.
Oh, fun.
And I may travel to Europe.
Ooh, very fun. So, what decision was the most important in this tournament?
Uh, I can't say which one is the most important, but I mean I know the worst decision is that I didn't use cyan in the final. You know.
hmm Yeah,
This is my worst decision. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you say that. We were very curious about it, but it ended up working for you.
I forgot about it because I'm so nervous. I was so nervous,
Yeah, understandable. Which of your decks was the strongest?
I think it's Britain USA ramp.
Britain, US? Okay, very nice. Why do you think that ramp is strong right now?
Because I think the max limitation of the ramp deck is the highest, and I don't want to bring too many big units. You see, it makes me easier to deal with the aggros like Jaggro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if my ramp can deal with Jaggro as well as my deck can beat some big decks
Mm-hmm.
such as other ramps.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a great one.
Yeah, I agree. It worked really well for you. Which decks were you scared of, and which decks did you ban?
The most scariest one is Britain France.
That's what I thought.
France. Yes.
That's what I thought.
Uh,
Yeah. Um.
it
Yeah.
will make me lose many cards
Yeah. I
with
think. I think
honor and loyalty.
in English, we say mill, but I
Right? Yes.
think in
Yes.
Chinese it's bao pai.
对爆牌
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. And um. Yeah. Any other things that you would like to say?
That's all right. I'm so excited and thank you for your company.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks J King 7 and Berto and Baron and many other foreigners. I in my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much. You did
Thank you. Thank you.
absolutely excellent. Your Jagro game was one of the best games that I've seen. It was so
The
fun.
Jaguar is the worst one.
Oh,
I'm
you
not
think?
that good at this one. My Jaguar is so bad, I think.
All
But
right.
that's all right. In a word,
Yeah,
I got this champion. Yes.
yeah, congratulations one more time. Yeah,
Thank you.
I hope that you enjoy and that you celebrate. So,
Thank you. Thank
yeah, but I'll let you go to sleep now. So, congratulations and have a good rest of your night.
you. Okay. Thanks a lot. I will go to bed. Goodbye.
Bye.
Awesome. Great to hear from Spoker. Had some very interesting things to say. Surprised to hear that his Jagro deck was his least favorite, because Jagro is usually that go-to staple and very reliable. J King, do you have any remarks or thoughts after hearing about his insight on the Saiyan play of simply the nerves getting to him and just not thinking, wait, I can just stop all first responders with this?
I think that's entirely reasonable, and I think that's really what we all expected at the end of the day. Is using Saiyan to stop a countermeasure is something that doesn't really come up very often. So it's a card that you often use as just an additional fighter. It's going to be buffed with your Amphitas, it's going to be triggered with your suppressions, and it also can't be targeted by ground units, which can be very useful. And I feel like the least used part of Seiun is the countermeasure part. And when you're in the finals, when you've been playing all of these series, when you're stressed out, when you're down 2-0, you're not thinking about what the least used part of a card is in a specific matchup based on a specific card in their deck. You're thinking about other things. You're thinking about, well, do I want to play Damage Destroy? Do I want to try to pressure out with the damage from that? So I think it makes perfect sense that he didn't see that. And also, he said Jagro's not his favorite. He probably doesn't have that much experience on Jagro. And I know that he loves ramp. He plays ramp on ladder even when he's climbing high on ladder, he's still playing ramp. He's brought it to every tournament deck for at least the last 6 months. How fitting is it that ramp is the deck that gets him across the line?
Yeah, and I mean, he had a lot of success in that ramp deck. He seemed very, very comfortable. He seemed to know exactly what buttons to push and when to do it. Korn, you have a little bit of a reputation for being a little bit of a menace, going around with your slightly more niche ladder decks and trying to cause some havoc on those people trying to play the more meta decks. We've got a good range of decks that we've had over this weekend. Is there one which stands out to you where you're going to go and try this and give it a go? Or is there any sort of theme about these decks where you've been inspired by some of these?
I would say the decks that in this tournament, I didn't really see that much of the Italian ally decks being played, even throwing it back to Tree Pipit on his German Italy deck. That was pretty cool. And then also the German Soviet tank decks. There's a lot of just tank decks going around. So yeah, I am excited to see how the people watch this tournament and then go back to the lab, and they can either try to counter the decks they saw today, or they can try to fine tune them and see how it affects the Blood and Iron meta down for the days and for the in-game tournaments to come. It should be pretty interesting.
And then Fanatron, you've been up and about with tournaments. You've seen a lot of players come and a lot of players go. In this tournament, was there anyone that surprised you? Anyone you expected to go further than they did? Or anyone that you thought wouldn't go so far and they actually pulled through? What was the bracket like compared to how you expected it to be?
So as a whole, right, because the bracket for the World Championship certainly isn't just top 16, right? It involves, multiple stages. I think that some really let's say young players, young in their sort of careers, not necessarily their age, made some really great some really great results. Players like Takao and Guest and Juan, who certainly haven't been on the scene very long or haven't made a lot of tournaments, getting this far, getting to maybe play on stream, or getting, basically just all of their decks shown and the results that they were able to get, I think is really cool, and definitely probably the highlight of their sort of competitive years or competitive season. I think that's great to see. And then also with some of the players like Killswitch and Callan, who and in Gorky, right, who we saw, didn't get to participate a ton this year for the full year. Maybe they participated more so in the beginning of the year, but certainly had like large gaps. Maybe only played 2,000 games out of the whole year, whereas a lot of other people played, 7 or 8, and still able to make it this far.
Just a small 2,000 matches, nothing.
Just a measly, easy weekends.
Stuff.
Yeah. I've seen a J King stream. He does that in a day and a half. So, really, really cool to see all these players kind of come together, and also a really good geographical split as well, right? We had a North American, we had some guys in Europe, we had of course quite a few players from China, and then even some more out there places like Romania with Callan, and not even sure where Juan is from, but some
South America.
I believed it was South America, but I couldn't get more specific than that. Argentina is what I'm being told in my ear. So very, very cool to see as well. So yeah, really, really successful year for a lot of people to be proud of, especially our top players.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be it from us for now. We will see you guys when we next get to see you guys, whether it's in a Discord, and a Twitch stream, on a YouTube. We're all over the place. It's quite difficult to get rid of us, even when you do your best to. But that's been it. Congratulations to Spoker. Congratulations to top 4 and top 16. Thank you to all the players. Thank you to production, the co-casters, and especially thank you to you guys and to 1939 for helping this all happen. We will see you guys shortly, and much love and cheerio.
2, 1.